Yo, this is Alex Mouth for Destiny, and today I have the great pleasure of interviewing Geoffrey Verity Schofield, a real natural that I've been following for quite some time now. Really impressed with his content, gives great training advice. So today, we're going to ask him some questions about what it means to train properly, and we're going to dive into some of the things we see in the community. So how you doing today, Geoffrey?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your channel.
It's a pleasure, man. So I want to start off with a very basic question. Who are you? And what's your training background?
Yeah, I'm Geoffrey Verity Schofield. Originally, I was a runner. So when I was 15 years old, I'd never heard of weight training, and my parents were like, "Oh, try running cross country." So I started that. I fell in love with that, and I wasn't that good at it, but I was always like the kid who everyone knew was trying way too
Mm.
hard all the time. So you're supposed to just train and not run all out. But like every session, it was just, I don't know, I couldn't hold myself back. And I was always, the person running way too hard. So I did that for like the next decade or so. And, running's a tough sport. It's a lot of injuries. I would say it's even more than lifting weights in terms of injuries. Um, and then, so I was kind of banged up, beaten up, tired of that. And, I decided to give the whole like getting swole thing a shot. And so I started lifting about 7 years ago when I was 25 years old.
And so you started off very skinny being a runner, but you always had that work ethic of pushing things hard. So I would imagine when you got into the gym, you naturally applied that mindset, right?
Yeah, actually, in some ways, running is more difficult than lifting weights. I mean, running till failure is miserable. Like if you run an all-out mile, it's it's horrible. I mean, it's way worse than doing, a 30-second set of lateral raises to failure or something. I mean, that's like I honestly felt like it was way easier. And I mean, I was pretty skinny when I started out. I was like 150 pounds, like 68 kilos. But it's weird because my goal was to get even skinnier. It was to
For
get
running.
for running, yeah, because you have to be light. And so I was looking at all the Kenyans who were, about my height, 6 feet, 1.83 meters, and they were like 120 pounds.
What?
Yeah, they're just built like rails, which is part of the reason why they're so good at running distances. So I was like running 10, 12, 15 miles a day, not eating very much, trying to go down in body weight, but I just wasn't going anywhere. I was super lean, but like the muscle just wouldn't fall off. Like what little muscle I
Wow.
just wouldn't there's pictures of me back then, and I still had traps despite never ever lifting weights, no shrugs, no deadlifts, nothing, running 70, 80 miles a week, not eating very much. Like I still had decent traps, and I was just
Yeah.
trying to get rid of like all the muscle I could, and it just wasn't working. And then when I
Yeah.
started lifting, I gained 12 kilos in 4.5 months. So
Goddamn.
like 25, 30 pounds or so.
Okay. And obviously, you're not built like the Kenyans who weighed in at 120 pounds, but being 150 and also super lean, did you notice any side effects from that? And like, how did you feel on a general level compared to when you started lifting and putting on this extra mass? And what were the food implications on your total daily energy expenditure? Like when you started lifting, were you still doing a lot of cardio?
I would run to the gym, which was maybe a mile or so, and then I would run back. But apart from that, I didn't run. And that was like for most people, running a mile to the gym and then running a mile back.
That they
It's
don't
like
even do that.
yeah, like that's a yeah. Well, that's a pretty significant amount for most people. But I had been running so much that it was just, it was a warm up basically. Um, I didn't. Well, I did count calories very strictly, just because I had heard that's what lifters or fitness people do. So I started counting calories and being very strict with that side of things. But I ate a lot. I mean, I ate, probably mid 3000s of calories per day. And I was eating way too much protein. That's another thing. I heard
Oh
like,
yeah.
gotta get in your protein. And so I was like, at least 200 grams of protein every day. And some days I was like 400 grams of protein per day, which is not, yeah, which is not, that's not needed at all. Like now we know, or now I know, that's way too much, way too much.
Hey, it's all good. You still got buff in the end. And how long did it take you to get like real noticeable results?
I mean, I started out not strong at all. Um, maybe squatting 50 kilos, like not much more than 100 pounds, deadlifting 80 kilos, so, 185 ish, benching maybe 40 to 50 kilos. So, you know, under 100 pounds or so. So I wasn't that strong, but yeah, I noticed results pretty quick. And not all 12 of those kilos was muscle. I know someone's going to be like, he said he gained 12 kilos of muscle in 4 months. Not what I'm saying. That's
No,
that's
no.
not even possible with steroids. I bet that's just way beyond. So
Well,
it was a decent amount of fat as well,
yeah.
but yeah, I did notice physical differences pretty quick from training.
Yeah. Well, you're probably below your natural set point, being 6 feet at 150. So a lot of
Yeah.
it was water retention and just gaining what was supposed to be there in the first place. Because right now you're what, 210? So
Yeah, 215.
there you go. It's a 60-pound difference. Doesn't mean you gain 60 pounds of muscle. So that itself should tell the viewers what really happened, you know?
Yeah, exactly. When someone says they gained 60 pounds of muscle across a training career, usually it's weight. When you hear these Hollywood actors, oh, he gained
Oh
30
yeah.
pounds of muscle, like it's water, it's glycogen, it's bloat. Like when you train with weights, you get, inflammation, you get increased glycogen storage, you do retain water. Plus, a lot of these Hollywood transformations, maybe they're not as
Hmm.
natural as people think. Obviously, they can't talk about what they're doing, but I think a lot of these guys are sousing it up a little bit, sometimes a lot of bit, and but they're contracted to not talk about it because
Yeah.
Hollywood and Disney and family friendly, and they can't disclose that at all.
They
But a lot of these guys, yeah, they're not natural.
they got to paint an image that you can be like them too with enough hard work, right? And it's the same thing with these professional athletes. Sports are clean, but we all know they're not. So,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it is what it is, but I think when we look at those transformations and they put on 20 pounds, okay, maybe not all of it was muscle, but it's still a lot more rapid than they otherwise would have gained. But then I'll see some influencers coming out with their videos saying that those physiques are unachievable, when in reality, they are if you train for 3 to 5 years. It's not going to happen in 6 months like that guy who injected his way there, but it could happen in the long run.
it's weird because I did a video a few days ago on a Natty or Not article where it was like the 18 best natural bodybuilders, and the list was all over the place. I'm not going to name drop, but there were a few lifters in there who were like, we all know are not natural. Like, people in the know they're not natural. Some very, very developed guys who stay lean year round. They're 50 years old and they're still diced year round. And so, obviously not natural. But then there are also some guys who I could see being natural. You can tell the difference if you look long enough and you see enough natural versus not natural physiques. And there are a few guys who I can tell like they weren't that big. They were just fairly lean and they were before a contest.
Yeah.
Um, or they weren't that lean, but they're pretty big. As a natural, you kind of have to choose. You can't be at your biggest and leanest and strongest all at the same time. If you have those, I mean, that's a surefire sign that someone is juicing because it's just not going to happen in a natural state. You got to give, something like you got shredded. You didn't keep all your strength, I assume, right?
I lost a tremendous amount of strength. Just some of my
Yeah.
body weight movements pretty much maintained. Like one arm pull ups, I was repping out six. It was easy. Everything else, no. Like my bench went to garbage. Okay,
Yeah.
I'd probably die doing 4 or 5. And people see you flexing under the lights and you're pumped up. That's the only time you look good. What they don't
Yeah.
realize is that when you're that lean, you're floating in everything, like literally everything. Your pants, it looks like you have chicken legs, and you look. Do you even lift status in a t-shirt? And that's not an over exaggeration. So although I look good in that video, and many other naturals that actually do stay shredded look good when they are in front of the camera, especially when they're close like this,
Yeah.
not in real life. And some people have pointed that out when going expos, like, hey, this guy's not actually not that big, you know?
Yeah, of course. Like I think a lot of people use that to their advantage where they have to stay lean year round because they're not that big. And so they have to use, the
Exactly.
angles and everything in order to show the shreds, which make them look way bigger. The trouble is if you're natural and you're trying to stay that lean, progress becomes basically non-existent or like just super, super slow. And
Yeah.
so even if you're naturally lean, it just becomes, very, very difficult. And I think main gaining can work, but it's not going to work at 10% for a natural. Maybe for some very weird outlier where they're just naturally very, very lean. But for the vast majority of people, trying to stay very, very lean year round. I mean, that I did that for a while. Like I tried, I had the whole like, you got to have the abs, you got to have the shreds thing in year like 2, 3, 4, but I wasn't making as much progress as I should have. And it was only when I sort of let myself go up in body weight where I saw better progress. Because like you can recomp and you can main gain and you can try to, do the whole trade fat for muscle thing. But especially if you're natural and you don't have that partitioning effect, that P ratio effect of steroids, it's just going to be super slow or you'll go nowhere. You'll literally just, it'll be a year from now and you'll be like, I think I look better. But, you show people a before and after picture and then they're like, oh yeah, you look way better. And you're like, oh, that was actually the before. So yeah. So if you're natural, like don't try to maintain the physiques that you see on social media because
Exactly.
you're just sacrificing your progress.
Yeah, you raised a lot of interesting points there. So we're gonna cover all that, but you mentioned you had plateaued after a certain point, and that was probably because you tried to stay lean for too long. And then when you started bulking up again, all the strength and mass started piling on, right? So one thing about that, which is very true, even though some people could make gains while being close to single digit or directly at it, it might not be optimal gains. And that's the point that needs to be stressed. For example, there's one natural that I follow, I believe he is anyway, who should have benched 4 or 5 by now. But because he's so stubborn and staying shredded year round, he's not there. And I guarantee you that he would have done it 2.5 years ago. So that's a lot of progress just to have the illusion of looking bigger, the cuts, you know? So I think it's also a fantastic coincidence that all the old school greats were at a slightly higher body fat, 12, 15%. And even when they competed, they weren't even single digit. So I think that says a lot that, hey, you'll probably look bigger, fuller, and have better strength gains at a slightly fluffier range. We're not telling people to become super fat, like 30% or above, but you can still be healthy and, have decent definition.
Yeah, I did a video on how, because I'm like 20% body fat right now, maybe 19, 20, 21%. And it's amazing how vilified that is
Yeah, it's
in the
so weird.
fitness industry. Like, I didn't think about this shit before I was in the fitness industry or consumed a lot of fitness content.
Hmm.
And, I have body dysmorphia. I had it worse than I have it now, but like it's impossible to be in the fitness industry without always seeing these physiques that are not achievable. Either they're
Yeah,
just like the perfect photo out of the 20, 50, 100 photos they just took. Sean Alawani actually did a video on this recently, and I think most people in the fitness industry have body dysmorphia.
I
And
agree.
yeah, how many people take steroids because they weren't happy with their physique, even though their physique compared to the general population was a 99% physique. I mean, after
Mm-hmm.
the whole G-shred thing, I said I would assess body fat percentages of people for free. And I did. And I assessed like probably about 1,000 people by now. It was like 300 the first day. That was that was a hassle. I don't regret it, but like that was a lot of pictures of
Sacrifice
dudes.
for the greater good.
Yeah. I mean, assessing someone's body fat percentage doesn't take a long time. So to value that at hundreds of dollars just pissed me off. And, so I decided, just do that for free. And there were so many people who qualified their physique. They're like, oh, I'm at the end of a bulk. I know I look like shit. Oh, I ate a large meal right before these pictures, or, I'm feeling a little bloated, or I'm retaining water. But they have a six pack. They're
Mm-hmm.
like 12% body fat or something. And they're like, yeah, I'm at the top of a bulk. You're 13% body fat, dude. Like, how is this the top of your bulk? You're just gonna be yo-yo dieting. You hear about yo-yo dieting for people who are overweight, but there's also yo-yo dieting for people who are too lean, and they should give themselves a larger window to, to main gain or to recomp or to bulk and then cut, or however you want to say it. Like, they're all just sort of details in what progression you want to take, right?
It's a shame because even when I got into the industry, I was talking about bear mode being 15 to 20% body fat, and everyone was shocked. Like, what is this guy saying? I'm not supposed to be shredded year round, or 10%
Yeah,
body fat, or minimum 12. Like, if you're above 12, you're fat. That's what
yeah,
people were saying back then. I'm like, bro, 15, if you go to any doctor, they're going to say, you're great. Stay
yeah,
at this body fat. You don't have to get any leaner. And it's interesting because a lot of skinny people you see in real life aren't even shredded. They're just small because they lack muscle. But even then, when average people look at those skinny people at, say, the beach, they think, wow, they're really lean. I want to have a waist like that. I want to have that level of definition. So when you got into the industry, you were a bit confused because you're on the slightly fluffier side. You got this muscle, and the standards are completely different from what is in real life. And you already had body dysmorphia to top it off. So I think it goes back to what we keep saying is that there's a really big disconnect between what goes on in the online world versus real life.
yeah. No, if you look at Vitruvian Physique did a video a while ago, and in there was a data chart looking at what percentage of the population was what body fat percentage. And the average American male, dude, man, person was 28% body fat, which that's too high. Like, as a species, we got to get that
Yeah.
shit down. That's not great, especially if you don't have a lot of muscle, you're sedentary, you have blood sugar control issues. You don't want to be 28% body fat for a lot of reasons. Even if you have muscle, 28% is like,
Still
I
too
mean, it's
high.
up there. Yeah, it's just too high. And then you have people who are 40, 50, 60% who, that should be the biggest thing in your life to try to get down, especially if you're on the high end of that. But the 99th percentile in terms of leanness was 14%.
Fudge.
It was by caliper. And the other method of measuring the 99% was like 11% or something. So, if you're mid-teens, you're going to be leaner than the vast majority of people. But you don't know it because you're only comparing yourself to people on Instagram who are all,
Say it, Jeff.
sitting up.
Only the best of the best, in most cases, are the ones that are going to excel. They're the guys that have the voice. And it doesn't help that the majority are enhanced. So they're already setting a standard that's unrealistic because they themselves are not natural. And then the whole body fat thing, like the majority of their audience is probably not even close to that level to begin with, let alone the majority of the population in general. So already the standards have been skewed from the get-go. When it doesn't have to be that way because if you're 12 to 15% body fat, you're still going to look lean and big. Like, I'm sure no one would look at you and say you're 20% body fat. But because you have the muscle mass, you look good.
Yeah, like I think muscle allows you to get away with a wider range of body fat percentages. And
Absolutely.
that's part of the reason why a lot of beginners, they try to cut down too low because they don't have that muscle mass. And so the only thing they can really try to aspire to is the leanness. They say, oh, I don't have the
Hmm.
mass, therefore I've got to cut down. The thing is, if you don't have the mass, you're not going to look good when you're shredded anyway. I was watching a podcast. Um, I think it was Greg Knuckles and Eric Trexler. I think it was Eric Trexler who said it. He said that beginners will cut down thinking they'll get shredded. I ordered shredded, but I got skinny instead. So you
Mm.
don't look impressive when you don't have that much muscle. You just kind of look emaciated. And for example, when I was a runner and I was super lean, I didn't look impressive. I mean, my neighbor started bringing me bowls of rice because they thought I was dying.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how lean and just emaciated and gaunt I looked because I not only didn't have very much muscle, but I was a pretty low body fat percentage, and that's what happens to a lot of beginners um, when they need to pick the fork up. That's what they need to do. They need to stop putting the fork down and pick it up and actually eat because thinking you're going to recomp it at 11% body fat is either just not going to happen or it's going to take way longer than it should.
I think the obsession with abs and just trying to be a shredded influencer is the issue. And it's like we pointed out before, a lot of the aesthetic bras are small. So even if you are, say, an intermediate lifter, you're still probably not going to be that big if you get down to 9% body fat, just to say. And anyone who thinks they're going to be massive at that level is deluding themselves. So imagine if a novice or just complete beginner in general attempts that. It's as you said, they're going to look emaciated. Like in my case, I did a cut recently. I was down to 145 pounds. The last time I weighed that, I was like 15 years old or something. So even if you're an elite lifter, quote unquote, you're still going to not weigh that much when you get down to those levels.
Yeah, most people underestimate how much weight they need to lose to get super lean. So, for me to be sliced and diced, I would probably need to go from 215 down to 180, 170, 175. Like it's lower than most people would think. Because I still have abs a little bit, right? Like they're blurry, but they're still there. And a lot of people will see, a four pack or, a biceps
Hmm.
vein or a little bit of like chesticle action, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm like 10 pounds away from getting on stage." No, you're 40 or 50 pounds in
Yeah.
reality. You lose all the fat and the water and your
Yeah.
glycogen, and then you'll probably lose some lean body mass, at least in the form of of sometimes muscle, right? Like
Hmm.
ideally no, but if you look at a lot of the natural bodybuilders nowadays, they'll do like a 40-week prep, which is, I mean, it's insane. It's a huge commitment, but that's what it takes to get stage lean without losing muscle mass.
Exactly.
And that's why the silver era guys, they didn't they didn't mess with that. They'll get to 10% or 11%, their body will push back and they'll be like, "Oh, I guess I'm not supposed to go any lower." Because maybe they were smarter than the guys nowadays and they listen to their body. And there'll be a point where your body says, "Hey, piss off. This is not really supposed to keep going." And natural bodybuilding, competitive natural bodybuilding, it's going through that. It's going through that, another 4, 5, 6, perhaps 7% in some cases to a place that you don't want to be, your body doesn't want to be. And, that's why I don't compete because I don't see the point and it gets in the way of your long-term progress.
Right. Because I was going to ask you about that too, why you don't do it. So there's not only the fact that, well, first of all, you don't need to. You're doing this for yourself and you don't need that standard to look good. What's the other reasons? Like you'd be competing against fake natties as well, right? So that kind of diminishes your accomplishment.
Yeah, also I like food. I like to be able to eat. And yeah, I just don't see the point. I'm not taking anything away from people who do it. Um, in fact, if anything, the reason, you know, I don't do it, but that makes me have more respect for the people who do partake in it. Because I know it's not easy, requires a lot of discipline and drive and commitment, and it's not for me. But when I see someone do that, especially if I genuinely think they're natural, I mean, hell yeah, hats off to them. It's just not for me. Plus, yeah, the whole fake natural thing, you have no idea if the people you're competing against are actually natural. And even just like TRT, that can have a tremendous impact on how much muscle you retain. I mean, I've heard of guys who their TRT compared to not TRT was like 15 or 20 pounds of muscle, or at least body weight difference. So that when they're on TRT or not TRT, it's a 15 to 20 pound body weight difference. And if someone blasts gear and they go up to a high amount of muscle, they'll retain more when they go back to being natural. And
Yeah,
so this is what I've heard. It's a common tactic. You run a few cycles in the off season, you build up to above your natural potential, above what you could do naturally. And then you cycle off that, but you can retain a lot of that. You can retain a lot of that because retaining muscle is easier than gaining it.
exactly.
So, I mean, I would hate to be on stage looking at someone and be in just there would be that voice in my head where it's like, how natural is this person? Are they actually lifetime natural? Because it does provide lasting changes that are going to stick around for the rest of your life in terms of satellite cell proliferation,
Yeah,
just the extra lean body mass. And I just don't think it's worth competing in. I mean, you can build your body without competing.
exactly. So they keep the satellite cells, and they could have blasted all kinds, got a super physiological physique, quote unquote, and then just
Yeah.
maintain some of that with a low dose of testosterone, right? And then it's labeled as TRT. Now, and people don't understand that if they would have started off with actual low T and then they got on TRT, they weren't going to put on the extra 20 pounds of muscle. It might have been maybe 3 or 4 pounds, and then the weight would have maintained. So the fact that they're using this as a strategy to hit a certain ceiling and then just keep it, that's what
Yeah.
makes a difference. And
Imagine
you
if
know,
Phil Heath, yeah, imagine if Phil Heath was like, I'm entering a natural bodybuilding
oh my
show.
God.
Like that could be a thing.
Well, it's
He
like even
identifies.
there were two guys that wanted to do a natural bodybuilding comp. I don't know how many months it's been now, but I'm looking at that like imagine you show up at a competition, you fucking dieted your ass off, you're like depleted, you're weak, you had your Pop Tarts the night before, you step on stage and you just see them all oiled up and tan, and you're like,
What the?
you know? But that's one
Yeah,
of the
no.
realities. And the thing is, you don't know who you're going to be up against and what they took in the past, because that little edge can make all the difference.
I'll probably gain a kilo of muscle a year, like 2 pounds of muscle. I mean, at most. Like
Super
if someone
slow.
said, if someone said at the beginning of the year, oh, you can sign this contract and you'll guarantee yourself 2 pounds of muscle this year. You still have to go to the gym, you still have to do everything the same, but you're locked in for 2 pounds of muscle. Beginners should never sign that contract because you can do way better than 2 pounds. Even in your third, fourth, fifth year, you should be able to get more than 2 pounds of muscle. But by year 7 and then 8 and then 9, 2 pounds is looking pretty good. It,
Yeah.
it, it adds up over time, but you know it's just slow year by year.
I don't think people realize just how slow it is. And that's why it's so easy to tell who's enhanced just by looking at the rate of progress. If you've been training for 10 years naturally and you see like juicy gains in a short amount of time and it's real muscle, it's a dead giveaway. Like
Yeah,
we're not talking about someone who bulks up tremendously and then when they cut back down while maintaining most of their strength, the measurement is still somewhat there. Like if you're lean and adding inches at a time, doesn't really look too good.
Yeah, no way. It's just if you're getting newbie gains past where you should get newbie gains, something's going on. Just because that doesn't happen. You do get diminishing returns. You don't know where your potential is. It's somewhere theoretically, and most people aren't as close to it as they actually think. But you will see diminishing returns year by year. The one exception is as you keep training, you keep learning, and so you can get a
Yes.
more optimal program, and therefore, if you train exactly the same, you're going to get diminishing returns. But because you're still learning, perhaps you can shift things up a little bit. But I do think there
Yeah.
are just boundaries in place, and it's just an asymptote. As you get closer to that, it's just going to be slower. Even if you optimize things, it's just going to slow down. And I know guys who've trained for 15, 20 years, and for them, even 1 pound or half a pound a year is like pretty good going,
Yeah,
just
it is
because
good.
they've optimized things for a decade plus, optimized like as close as possible, and even those small little grams of muscle are something that still gets them excited.
Yeah, well, if someone started training at 20 and now they're 30 years old, they put on most of their muscle mass. Well, between 30 and 40, if they're only gaining a pound of muscle a year, or worst case, half a pound, that still adds up to quite a bit. By the time they're 40, they're going to have much bigger arms, chest, everything, like no doubt. And the strength will be reflected in that as well.
Yeah, that's why actually I'm always optimistic because getting to 90% of your potential, whatever that is, that doesn't take that long. I mean, it's I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years. That's why I like coaching people because I can see them make this rapid progress that I could never make, and I can live vicariously through their gains. I can relive my newbie gains through coaching. But for myself, yeah, it's always going to be slower, but it does add up. And the closer you get to your potential, the fewer people are up there. So if you go from like, using FFMI, fat free mass index, which is a measure of relative muscularity for someone's frame, if you go from 22 FFMI to 23 FFMI, that's a good jump. But if you go from 24 to 25, even if it's the same number, it's going to look relatively more impressive because fewer people are up there.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is part of the reason why steroids do skew things a lot because there are people out there who are 35 FFMI. I mean, Ronnie Coleman was like 40 FFMI or something. Rolly Winkler, 40 FFMI. And so, it's not uncommon for some guys to, over the course of many years, to have 100 extra pounds of lean body mass compared to where they were naturally or where they would have been naturally. Usually it's less than that. But for some people with big frames, they can blast their way up to just ridiculous amounts of muscle. And this is where, you know, standing on a natural bodybuilding stage, even someone running a modest cycle is going to have, I mean,
Exactly.
they could go from like average genetics or maybe above average genetics to like looking top 0.000001% just because that assistance makes a huge difference at the ends of that bell curve.
Yeah. Well, just say with the arms, I think I've heard some guys say for every 10 pounds you put on, you'll gain an inch on your arms. So let's say you're a natural bodybuilder on stage and you got like 15 to 16-inch arms. Juice head might have 20 plus. Now, if he's a low dose juicer, maybe he'll have 18-inch arms. But that 18 will look way better than a shredded 15. So even though it's not like 100 pounds of lean mass additional, it's still something that'll be noticeable. It gives you the edge to win. And even if the guy had worse genetics than you, like you have a better shape to your bicep, the way you distribute the fat, like
Yeah.
even if you're more advanced on that level, the sheer amount of size and then some of the cutting compounds that they use is just going to dwarf you every single time. So there is no competition in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can, and plus the training, you don't even have to. That's why you see a lot of these guys who they know nothing. They know nothing about training. You see them train, and you can just, I mean, um, it's laughable for people who know what they're training, to know what they're doing about training. Look at these guys, but beginners, they don't have that base of knowledge to realize it's a circus. And
Yeah.
seeing these guys doing, I mean, it's just for the clicks and the views, but they can't
Hmm.
say it's for the clicks and the views. Well, sometimes they do. Joel Seedman was like, it's for the clicks and the views. But most guys are never gonna say they're in a circus. Um,
Exactly.
yes, props to him for saying that it's marketing, but also not props for doing it in the first place.
I guess he's just gonna keep doing what he wants to do anyway. And there's so few people that actually looked at the interview that doesn't care. He's still getting his athletes to show up, and people still get the clicks on. But that's what it is at the end of the day, a circus. And I think I know what you're talking about in this situation. Although there are many people who have gone down this path, and it's just sad to see because novices don't know any better, and they're the ones that are being preyed upon, and they end up in this never-ending cycle of not making gains. And if they were to just get out of that phase, which doesn't take long at all, it's literally the easiest part of your entire training career. Like, this is a joke, guys. If you
Yeah,
just get out of that, you would see that what these people are promoting is garbage.
yeah. Actually, in your talk with natural hypertrophy, you were talking about. You didn't mention his name, but I knew.
We
I knew.
already know, bro.
I know exactly. I knew.
Bro.
Like it was. I mean, it could have been referencing anyone because there are a lot of people who do this, but I knew.
That's
I knew. Like I knew exactly who it was. He's a big YouTuber. I won't name drop because you know, I don't want to make it seem gossipy. It's prolific, right? Like there are a lot of people who do the same thing. Flies with plates. Why?
exactly,
Why?
yeah.
Because it looks novel, it looks new, it looks unique. And the scary thing is, in the comments, it's almost always universally praising them.
Always, yeah.
And if
Even
you
with the most
criticize it,
gimmicky bullshit. Like, that's
oh
what I
yeah,
don't get.
yeah. And like if you criticize it, the people you're trying to help will attack you.
Yeah.
That's the thing that actually kind of grinds my gears, where I'll make a video on this BS and it's clearly BS. They'll say, "Oh, progressive overload doesn't work. Stop doing your compound movements." Stuff like that. Exactly what beginners don't need to hear. Like the two things, the
Hmm.
only two things you need, because you don't need a lot of things. A lot of stuff is negotiable. Progressive overload and compound movements. I don't know. Those are two kind of important things for anyone who wants to, gain muscle and get stronger and look jacked. And when I pointed that out, I got more dislikes than likes on that video. Yeah, from fanboys and people who were like, "I've been doing his training plan for 2 weeks and I feel great." Well, yeah, you feel great because it's easy because you're curling with the pink dumbbells doing partial reps and you got to pump. You got to pump, but you would have gotten the same results pumping something else, right?
Hmm.
It's where the training is just completely secondary, and they think they're going to look like this influencer, but they're not. It's just that kind of training doesn't work unless you're enhanced, and a lot of times they don't even do this kind of training.
Well, some of these people have been found doing different workouts at the gym, like
Yeah,
literally caught red-handed. But I'm actually skeptical that their subscribers are actually making gains at all. I don't believe the comments. That might be pessimistic on my part, but I don't. If a guy just subscribed recently, and we know that natural gains are slow by default, if they are making progress, it's because they must be extreme noobs. Like, they're the absolute beginners. But what they don't know is that a big plateau awaits. And when that
yeah.
happens, like, it's not going to get any better for them. So I genuinely feel sorry for these people. When I look at the comment section, I'm like, man, you can't see that this is happening.
They have to be beginners because if they weren't beginners, they would know already. You it's hard to target advanced athletes because first there's not very many of them, and so why would you try to market to a tiny population within a tiny population. Because lifting in general is kind of niche compared to the general
Yeah,
population.
kind of.
So you're targeting like a tiny segment of a relatively small segment of the population. Plus, advanced lifters often, well, they have their shit together, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be advanced by definition. Third, often they're difficult to sell to. So in terms of like supplements, training plans,
Hmm.
an advanced lifter doesn't need a training plan. They have already had their own training plan. Otherwise, they would still be intermediate at best. So, the fact that it's a small population and you can't sell to them means that almost no one is going to actually targeting advanced lifters or try to get people actually from beginner to advanced.
Good
These
point.
influencers, they want you to stay a beginner, both mentally and physically, because if you're not, they've lost a customer.
It's actually to their advantage. So maybe that's
Yeah.
why they do it. Besides the fact that it looks cool, it works in their favor. Win-win cash-wise. Let's go.
Yeah, no, it's
But
it's all about the money for them. And some content creators have made it very clear that they are financially driven,
yeah,
by their pricing, by their marketing, like advertising their services in comments on other people's videos. I've seen that. And just it's all this show designed to leech as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, from as many people as possible. And that's only possible if you target beginners. There's
yeah,
more of them, they're more gullible, they don't know, they don't have that base of knowledge, they don't have that experience. And so they're being taken advantage of. And
yeah.
then when you call it out, those same people, because they're in this cult, let's just call it what it is. Often it's a cult. It's just,
Hmm.
they have this parasocial relationship. This is their god. And when you criticize their god, even if you're trying to help them, they get pissed.
You just get labeled as a hater.
Yeah.
And what I like about your approach, and pretty much what a lot of the naturals do, is we give advice, informative videos. We don't try to overly. Obviously, there's not, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with selling something if it's legit, reasonably priced. We all got to pay the bills, and if you're doing something
Yeah.
that's good and you're not forcing anybody to buy it, then so be it. So you have your book, I got mine, great, but
Yeah.
it's not shoved in your face every 2 seconds, and we're not going on other people's channels trying to market it
Yeah.
or make outlandish claims about it either. So
Yeah. I think the
I
pricing is the biggest one. Yeah. You see
yeah, and
some ebooks
also
and they're just,
they're a bit too much, like double, triple. Uh, like I understand if it's a full-blown course with actual videos and it's something that has a really high production value. Some people even record their seminars, like they have real-life workshops and then they have videographers. That's a
yeah.
different ball game. But if it's a simple ebook,
Yeah.
not so sure what you're doing there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, when I reviewed a certain large content creator's training book, I was way nicer than I should have been, like way nicer, because at the time I was a fan of his, and I said you can buy it to support him, but like you've got to be a diehard fan to drop that money on the actual product, just because there was a lot of filler, a lot of fluff, and yeah, again, there's nothing wrong with selling something. Someone pointed out, oh, you're selling your book, and you mentioned your book in your video, but it depends on the price, it depends on the product, it depends on how much. Like everyone has to eat, and so you know monetizing your channel in some way, that's sort of a given. You look
Hmm.
at natural hypertrophy, the world doesn't deserve someone like natural hypertrophy. Like he's too pure, he's too,
He's
I
the
mean,
ultimate level that
yeah,
we
no,
wish
he's
we could
he's,
aspire to
he's
be.
yeah, exactly. Like I wish I didn't have to sell anything and I could give everything away for free. Um, but like this is my job essentially, and this is your job, right?
Yeah.
This is what we do professionally. So, natural hypertrophy is he's an extreme outlier in terms of like truthfulness and not monetizing, and he actually tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Like he'll make a video and
Yeah.
it's not to diddle the algorithm. It's not to pay the bills. It's not to clickbait people. It's literally just saying something that needs to be said. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, that kind of content, it just doesn't get the same kind of reach as, oh, David laid natty or not, right? It's
Yeah.
just,
The thing
it's
is,
just,
it does, but in a different way. It gets falsely labeled as telling people this is what they need to hear. So you can claim to be about the truth, but your actions say a lot more than that. And I think natural hypertrophy exemplifies what it really means to have a stoic approach as a fitness influencer. He's the real deal, and I've never seen anyone on that level. So I'm just continuously impressed, you know. But one thing about making money is that we also put it back into the channel, and it also
yeah,
depends if you're a simple guy or not. Like for me, I like to read books. I like training. I like different barbells. I don't spend a lot of money, so most of it is saved. So if I'm gonna put big bucks down, it's gonna be on a camera, different tripod. Those I can confidently say that those have been my biggest expenses besides my car. It's always YouTube stuff. So even if you're getting paid, it helps the viewer ultimately in that way. So of course nothing's forced.
yeah. Like I mean, I don't buy things like just in general. Um, like some people have, they buy expensive liquors. Like I don't really drink much. I mean, a couple times a year. Um, I don't go out that much just because YouTube is very time consuming and if you want to be a YouTuber,
It's a lot.
yeah, don't expect 40-hour work weeks. Like you're not going to clock in at 9 a.m., clock out at 5 p.m. No, like you're going to be working way more than you actually think. So um, that's one interesting thing. I get asked by people who are, they come to me for advice on their YouTube channel, and it's just be prepared to work. Basically, you know,
Yeah,
you probably work what 70, 80-hour weeks.
man, you lose track, but
Yeah,
you it's not 9 to 5. It's all day almost because also you
nine
get
to nine.
ideas in
Yeah,
your brain and there's only so many creative sparks, right? So for me, I have a notebook and I'm usually on my computer most of the time anyway. When I get these ideas, I pull out the pen and I just start writing. And that's the thing too, constantly coming up. There you go, my man. It's the creative work, right? So you have to come up with all these videos, and there's only so much to talk about too. And also, as your channel grows, the level of quality increases, and now you're
yeah,
putting more effort into the videos, more B-roll. You're
yeah,
more selective with what you say. You can't get away with things that worked in the past because people have a certain expectation, and
yeah,
it's your job to give them what they need, right?
yeah.
So all these factors combined, it really is a lot of work, but I think you're doing it the right way, and I could see the changes. Like even from 2020 till now, it's immense what you've done, and you're touching upon subjects that's like, wow, a lot of people wouldn't make videos on that just because the algorithm wouldn't like it, but you do it anyway because that's what needs to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there are some videos that in the YouTube studio, like you'll know this, but I think a lot of people won't know this. YouTube tells you how
Yeah,
well every video does. It very clearly, you can see like, oh, how many views it's getting down to the minute, just how many views, with the click-through rate and everything, just how this video is doing. It'll tell you how each video is doing in comparison to your previous 9 videos. So you make a video, it'll say this video is number 2 out of the past 10 videos in terms of views at this point in time. So after 3 hours, oh, this is how many views it has. It's ranked number 7 or number 10 or number 1 or number 2 or whatever. And I can usually predict how well a video will do. And you probably can, right? As well, just
yeah,
based on the topic and the title and everything.
dude, I know within minutes if this video is gonna do well or not.
Yeah.
Even when you're recording the video, just the topic itself, it's like, okay, I'm gonna address this because you know I haven't done it before and it's an important topic, but I already know people aren't gonna watch this that much. But the thing is, sometimes because you're the only dude talking about that, it'll come back months or years later. So it's not
Yeah.
instant gratification in that way. So it's still worth it. And you know what? If you can help out that niche audience that wants to see it, fantastic. It's better than having no content up because
Yeah.
having nothing well, the algorithm will punish you for that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're on this constant treadmill of having to create content. And then, YouTube used to be like you put out one video a week, right? That was the common thing. Like you have your weekly video. But now it's becoming a lot more professional, you know, corporate, corporations
Yeah,
basically. And so you have these people putting out daily videos and putting out 2 videos a day. And this is only possible with help with the editing.
yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, like, I mean, you can't put out a single video a day and have it be quality if you're doing it all yourself. Just because the editing takes, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 hours per video, possibly. And so, it's just not possible to do 2 videos a day without either burning out in a week or less, um, or having the quality go down very dramatically. And as your
Yeah,
channel grows, you mentioned like the quality has to go
exactly.
up, because people do expect it. Like if you have 2K subs, you can get away with just like the whole camera talking and nothing else thing. But with more, there is an expectation of quality. And some
Yeah,
people can get away with just talking to the camera. Like Steve Shaw, he just talks to the camera, no cuts, no edits, no footage. But I really like that because I appreciate his perspective, and he doesn't need to do that extra stuff, because he has a lot of experience and wisdom to share. Um, but unfortunately, I think for the younger generation, they have this need to always have something moving in the
right.
screen, changing. Otherwise, they click away. They need to be
Yeah,
very stimulated. Otherwise, I mean, they're on TikTok, and so if you're making a YouTube video, it has to be always go 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 go.
exactly. So either you delegate or you have to get really good at editing yourself because the more you
Yeah,
grow, like once in a blue moon, you can throw in like a 100% talking head segment. But if you start doing that consistently, you're gonna see the views are gonna drop off like crazy. Like I
yeah,
remember, it used to be very easy for me back in the day to gain subscribers. All I had to do was turn on my camera, talk for 10 minutes, and it was a done deal. I would get rid of the pauses and all that, upload it, done.
yeah,
Now it's like 5 times as much work because first of all, you have to be really careful what you say because you have a mission to provide good information, right? And then all the B-roll that's associated with that video, you got to go out and film it now. And it's even
yeah.
worse when you're doing this in public because now you have people walking all over the place. They cut out your shot. You're trying to get the right angle. Like having a home gym, that does help in
Yeah.
that respect. But actually, how is that for you? So you're in
Um,
China, you're filming these clips, and you have a lot of them too per video. What's that
yeah.
like?
Yeah, it's all right. It helps having an outdoor gym. I think the well, it's half outdoor, but
Yeah, which is
it
really
has
cool, by the
more.
way.
Yeah, it's thanks. Yeah, it's actually just over there.
Wow.
Basically a home gym, kind of. Um,
Yeah, basically.
but it's kind of a hassle sometimes. The wind will blow over my camera. I actually need to buy a camera stand at some point. Um, which goes back to like I don't spend money that much, but I
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
get like a better camera and like a whole new setup.
Be cool to
Um,
see you with a DSLR. The Jeffrey experience, bokeh background. You got the lights on. You know.
well, that's the thing. Like with the normal blue background, like it kind of looks a little bit. I've had a lot of sort of mixed feedback on that. Let's put it that way. So I need to like change that around because you can get away with that when you're under maybe 10K subs. But yeah, as the channel grows, like that becomes kind of weird because people expect, yeah, the lights and the high camera quality and like the cuts and the edits and everything. As for getting footage, yeah, I mean people walk in front of the camera quite a bit. I try to make it as friendly to the other people in the gym as possible. I've heard of other influencers like people walk in front of the camera and they get pissed,
Yeah.
but like
It's the other
I
way
mean,
around.
yeah, exactly. Like you're sort of disturbing other people. Why would you be pissed at them? Like they should be pissed at you if anything. So, it doesn't really impact stuff that much. Like you can always cut someone out of the footage or like just film again. I mean, I use fake weights, obviously, as every influencer does. So it's like, it's very easy to take, 300-pound curls and just do it again. But, it's not too bad. It does impact the workout sometimes.
Mm.
Like the other day I did a video on low pulls from the hang, and the first hour of my workout was just only that exercise, just, you know, 15 different sets, all low pull from the hang.
And how come? Because everything else was occupied, or like you couldn't get the angles?
Just getting a lot of footage. I usually try to get err on the side of getting more footage. Because the sets always, they don't take as long as you think. So you might do a
Yeah,
workout
it's
and
like 5 seconds when you
yeah,
time
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like an hour and a half workout, but then when you compress all the footage of the working sets, it might be 5 minutes or 10 minutes, in terms of like the time under tension. So, I try to get more footage rather than less. And if it's a 15-minute video, that might be, a few different sessions of working out.
That's the thing, right? Like you're working out for 2 or 3 hours, and then when you have all the clips at the end, it's really not that long. You're like, damn, like I'm gonna need another session to really complete this. So sometimes
Yeah.
if you want it, like either you recycle some older footage that's relevant to the topic, or you're gonna have to wait a few days before you're eligible. Like right
Yeah.
now, I want to do a segment on RDLs versus good mornings, but I need more good mornings footage. So I'm gonna train for a few more workouts. I'm gonna get it in, and that too, right? What people don't get is you're still doing your regular training, right?
Yeah.
So if you need certain footage on that day, you got to get it in. It's like, well, are you gonna compromise your recovery? How do you go about
Yeah.
it? You know?
Yeah. Like I'm definitely against fake weights. Obviously it was a joke before, but I see
Or
why
was it?
people would use it. Like I understand it. I mean, it's shitty to claim those as your own lifts. Like seeing, oh, he's pulling 5 plates, and oh, I didn't know you were so strong. But then you once you see their fake plates, you're like, oh, well, that kind of changes things. But I do understand it
Yeah.
because you don't want to just like use the bar for good mornings, right? Because it changes the dynamics of the exercise in
Yeah,
terms
it
of
doesn't
like
feel the same.
center of gravity. So you kind of need a working set and multiple working sets, and you don't want to compromise your training in terms of like how you're setting everything up in terms of just your split and everything else. And so yeah, you have to really plan around. You almost have to plan your training around the content creation in some ways.
Yeah, basically. Like some people just do exclusively, like let's say they're running a 4 day upper lower, they'll film 100% of it and they won't release those segments as workout videos, but they'll keep the clips for B-roll and just use that year round. Done deal. So everyone has their own way of going about it. But just to say, guys, like there's a lot that happens behind the scenes with content creation. It's not so simple.
Yeah, no, and yeah, the editing is what takes the longest. Um, Filming is the easy part. I would love to be able to film something and then just like toss it up, but it is very competitive now, and you want to be able to provide that quality content, and in the modern world, that has to be more than just having a conversation with the camera. I think long form content like this is a little bit different, but if you're just making a normal video, like a 5 to 10 or maybe 15-minute video, like it has to be constantly engaging. And like I'm normally like kind of, I just have a more relaxed approach to it. Like I'm not, super energetic or yelling or anything like that. And so, you know, that kind of content, in order to keep the watch time, because that's what it
Mm,
is, right? It's the watch time that is trying
yeah.
to be optimized. You go to any PewDiePie video who has 100 million subscribers and look at his editing. It's a lot of zooming in,
It's
zooming
every
out.
micro movement. It's designed to
Oh,
keep you
exactly.
like, yeah.
It's trying to like enthrall the audience. That's what it is. Trying to just capture them and get them fixated on the screen. And so yeah, every sentence zoomed in, panned, zoomed out, and that just takes a long time to edit. Plus, I don't like doing it that way. I think
Doesn't
it's
come off
okay
the
a little
same, huh?
bit. But yeah, it's a little bit like it's mildly manipulative in a way. Like a little bit is okay. But when it's like every literally every 2 seconds, I think it's like it's almost nauseating to me. Like I don't like watching content that does that. It's just
Yeah.
I feel like
You
I'm
know,
on a fucking roller coaster or something.
yeah, I'm old school like that. I like just regular, you know, conversations, but I understand this evolving fitness world doesn't work to the same extent. I even saw a movie recently and it was the same method. It was like every 2 seconds. I couldn't watch it. I was like, no, I'm done. But it's actually cool because you have a relaxed approach. You're pretty much yourself. You got like this sarcastic attitude as well with some of your jokes, which is fun. You don't have to be all hypey like, hey everybody, you're doing your thing, right? And you throw in movie clips, which I don't think I've ever seen other fitness YouTubers do.
Takes a while. That's why it's like you have to find.
Yeah.
I don't plan them out in advance. Usually, I mean, occasionally I'll have like something in mind before I say something when I'm filming, but usually it's afterwards. It's like, oh, I said something, and then
Yeah.
there's a reference there, and then I'll toss something in. But that's what takes the time. It's if there's something moving or something's labeled, and I have to move something with something on
Mm.
screen, that takes a long time. I mean, a 30-second edit might take a couple hours, at
Wow.
least an hour, I would say. And so, probably part of the reason why that's not seen very much is because it takes a long time, and it's
Yeah.
um, it's just a lot of effort and work. Finding the clips, cutting everything up, putting everything on screen, and sometimes it's quicker. Like once you have a system, it does speed things up, but still, it is a lot of work for sometimes a joke that's pretty lame. But yeah, but I like editing. It's tiresome at times, but it's something that I do get joy and pleasure from, and it's almost fun to do in a way at times too.
Yeah, sometimes it's like you're not in the mood to just talk. You'd rather just sit down and edit a video, and then you feel
Mm.
good. So now I want to go back to training topics,
Mm.
discuss what you do, and then in general just cover some basic advice. So one thing I want to talk about before was the importance of the basics. So we covered how there's a lot of crazy movements being shown these days. So what would be the alternative to that? The exercises that have stood the test of time that you personally recommend for just general strength training and hypertrophy.
In general, I'm a big fan of the basics. I think they have issues, but pretty much every exercise has issues, right? Like you
Right.
can find problems with literally any exercise.
It's all
Like, oh, it
context.
doesn't, yeah, like it doesn't target this area effectively, or, it could also target this area if you make this modification, or, this angle of pull feels a little bit better. But some of it is individual. A lot of it is irrelevant. When someone says, oh, you can isolate this muscle doing this, but that might not necessarily be necessary. You might not have to isolate a muscle. And people who say, like, oh, you have to use more weight on squats, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Or when people say, oh,
Huh.
you're working your glutes and your lower
I
back
I know where
as
you're
well
coming
as,
from.
yeah, well, I won't name names, but, when people say, oh, you're targeting other muscles as well as this muscle, I look at that as a good thing.
Yeah.
Instead, oh, like, the deadlift, oh, you're working your hamstrings and your calves and your glutes and your adductors and your quads and your spinal erectors and your lats and your traps and your forearms. Of course, it's a bad exercise. I'm like, no,
That's why
that's a
it's
good.
good.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're working more muscles. Maybe not every muscle optimally. Like who deadlifts for their lats, but the fact that you can hit so many muscles at the same time, that's training economy. I mean, that's
Yeah.
fantastic in my view. If you can hit more muscles at the same time, for most people, that's a good thing because they don't want to live in the gym, right? If you
Yeah.
can get more growth with fewer sets and do it faster, I mean, I look at that as an absolute win.
Yeah. Well, many powerlifters choose the low bar squat and don't even mess around with high bar that much. They're so specific and dialed in with it. And what's that going to involve? It's a posterior chain dominant way of doing it. So when they're squatting, the purpose is I'm going to strengthen all those muscles. It's not let's build quads from it. Because if that was their objective, they would probably do a heel elevated squat, something a bit more biased like that, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you got to ask, what's the context? Is it general strength training? Because even with deadlifts, we can talk about doing RDLs instead of conventional deads. And in
Yeah.
general, whenever you do more than one exercise that's very bang for your buck, you're pretty much going to gain most of your muscle from that session. Like if you're doing a basic knee flexion and hip hinge, like I would say you're pretty good. You did 3 sets of each, maybe twice a week. Like that, you're getting a lot done with that. And no one's going to tell me that you won't get incredible results in the long term, especially if you hit a certain level of weight, right? Because we can talk about the biomechanics not being optimal for targeting certain areas, but if the absolute load and the workload that comes from that is insane, like you're still going to get great gains. And even Alec Onkiri, he went for years without doing barbell rows because his deadlifts hit a point where he was always in the 500s, and that in itself caused upper back growth.
Yeah, like getting strong is it solves a lot of problems. I mean, it can create problems, but I would say for most people, it's gonna solve more problems. You know, you see all these posture videos, you know, where they're doing like some little
Yeah.
corrective bullshit or like some band, you know. I mean, there's value in that, but you could also just deadlift and do your rows and, you know, do these basic movements that will do the same thing and so much more. I mean, get you know, targeting multiple muscles and multiple different attributes through one exercise. I mean, that's a good thing overall.
Yeah.
And you know, there's always these problems, you know, and there's this strength versus aesthetics continuum, strength versus size, I guess. And you know, if you're a pure power lifter, yeah, you're going to train differently than a bodybuilder in terms of, you know, your RPE, in terms of your volume, in terms of your exercise selection. But most power lifters, if they're very strong, they're very big, right? There's still that correlation between
Yeah.
strength and size, and you can see it, right? You can, I mean, if you look at someone and they're just like this hulking mass of muscle, odds are they can move some weight. And if you see
Hmm.
someone in the moving weight, odds are they're a big individual. And so I think it's something like an 80 to 85% correlation between quad size and squat strength. I was
That's
reading a
crazy.
Greg Buckles Stronger by Science article. And yeah,
Mm.
85% correlation across a population. And so for an individual, it's going to be even more correlated. So if you get stronger at the squat, odds are your legs are going to get bigger. I mean, even if it's low bar, if you put a lot of strength on your low bar, odds are your legs are going to get bigger. I
Yep.
mean, in terms of your
And
adductors, your quads, you know, even
yeah,
your hands.
well, basically I think what we're getting at here is the absolute load will handle a lot of these problems,
Yeah,
even if it's not the best movement, quote unquote. And when we look at historically what happens to people who get these numbers, 9 out of 10 times they're jacked out of their damn mind. And the only exceptions seem to be those really rare people that just have insane leverages and are
yeah,
generally just small from novice all the way to advanced status. But most people aren't like that. They're very rare.
yeah,
And even in those individuals, if they would gain more size, they'd still be stronger. And sometimes
yeah,
it's that they're proportionally bigger in some regions. Like that guy, UFPF powerlifter, 154 uh, guy that benches 405, right? Everything's small except for his pecs. That's
yeah,
the only area that seemed to grow for him. He's very torso dominant. So when he has his shirt off, he's got these huge watermelon pecs. Like they're massive, but everything else is skinny. So even on that guy, like he still gains size. And who knows what that's going to be for the average person, like ratio wise between your other muscles, but you're still going to get results. And I think what's important is that if we're running a system that addresses our weaknesses, we're mindful of the fact that, okay, this movement might have some flaws, so let's add a little bit of extra, then we're not going to run into issues. So if you know that your quads are lagging from squats, we'll just hit another movement right after. Done
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah, Ed Cohen said that. I did a video on this pretty recently. He would add narrow stance high bar squats to work on his quads. Like he knew what exercise he needed to bring up his weak points. If you look at the Russian system and even the Chinese system too of weightlifting, it's weakness correction. It's
Yeah.
finding, what is limiting this movement and then bringing up that area in terms of muscularity, right? In terms of strength, obviously, is the goal, but usually it's going to involve putting on some size as well.
Yeah.
Like you don't get stronger hamstrings without getting bigger hamstrings. That, how it doesn't even make sense. And there are some extreme outliers, but even for them, strength and size are going to be correlated. So if you look at someone like Kaler Woolham, I mean, he pulled
Hmm.
445 as like a 16-year-old or something in the deadlift, and he looked he looked skinny. He was like 120 pounds or 130 pounds. I mean,
Mm.
he looked like a stick figure, but he pulled that weight. It was like 3 times body weight or something because he's very good at the deadlift. But for him to pull 953, a decade or so or whatever later, he had to put on a lot of muscle. I mean,
There
he's
you
in like
go.
the 90 kilo or 100 kilo weight class, and he put on a lot of muscle because he's not going to pull 953 at 120 pounds body weight. It's just, that's never going to happen. There's a reason there's weight classes,
Yep.
and that, as the weight classes go up, generally the totals go up
Yeah.
because they have
Yeah.
more muscle, and often,
That's
there
all
we
it is.
go.
They have more muscle. And that's a freaking great point, Jeff, because even in these rare individuals, which is not most people watching this right now, when they put on extreme levels of strength, the size still comes. So if you're
Yeah,
skinny, deadlifting 500, and you have the natural potential of doing 700, well, you're going to be a lot bigger now.
yeah,
Obviously, a regular dude pulling 700 pounds would probably be way bigger than that person, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's not about comparing ourselves. And I think if we bring it back to that, let's just get as jacked as we can be. Then
yeah,
it doesn't matter if our size and strength aren't correlated 1 to 1, even if like you're really strong right now, because there will come a point where you'll have no choice but to grow.
yeah,
Like for some people, they might have 18-inch arms benching 225. That's rare, but it
yeah.
happens.
Basically me.
Ah.
Yeah. Like
you know?
yeah, I know a guy who has, like, right now my right arm is like 17, almost 17 and three quarters. It's like 17 and a half, 17 and three quarters. Left arm is a little over 17. I have an imbalance there. But I know a guy who benches twice as much as I do. He doubles my bench, and he has about the same size arms. Freaky D, Dennis Arnold, and
Oh,
he actually, he overhead pressed my squat. So
yeah. Well, he's
he's like
very
humor, and he's he's natural too. So
and he
it
does a
just
lot of
shows, like,
poster benches too, just to say.
yeah, yeah. So it's like he's an outlier in terms of, like, he's stronger than you would expect, and I'm an outlier in terms of I'm bigger than you would expect based on, the numbers that I have in terms of powerlifting. But even then, for me to get bigger, getting stronger is the best way to do that. Even if I'm not like gifted at all in terms of strength, it's
So
still going to be the best way to go about it for me. So,
I agree.
yeah, and so, like, people said that I'm romantically attached to the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. No, I suck at them, but they're still good lifts for me in terms of building muscle.
Yeah. And that's what it means to leave your biases aside. So I'm curious. I want to put you on blast right now. Okay.
Huh?
How much you bench, bro?
I've done 115, so like 250 pounds, which is
For one
probably
rep
less
max?
than what. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. So you
yeah,
got you got those good arm genetics, man.
yeah,
Or you're just more
yeah,
responsive proportionally because you still look big overall.
yeah. It's weird because
Fudge.
people are always surprised by how low that number is, right? Like you said, oh, for one rep max, because like you thought it would be like for a set of
Like for
five.
reps, maybe, you know?
Yeah. So like
Man.
I'm always, open and honest about my strength or lack thereof. Um, because, I could get away with lying, right? Like if I said I benched 315, you would believe that, right?
I would, yeah.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that
That
makes
makes
sense,
sense.
right? Like, yeah, like, oh, I don't have the footage, but like that's why people use fake plates because,
Right.
I could make 115 look like 140, in terms of just like straining against it, etc. But I'd rather just be honest about it rather than, having to lie and use
Yeah.
fake plates, say I'm stronger than I actually am. Um, but I do realize like I'm a little bit of an outlier. So when clients are like, oh, or non-clients, they're like, oh, you know, I squat this much, I bench this much, I deadlift this much. It's almost the same as you. Why don't I look the same way? It's just
It's
genetics
not,
and then also training styles as well.
yeah, it's not just about that. And
Yeah.
even if your bench isn't the craziest right now, you're still experiencing slower gains muscle wise. So it's not like you're getting rapid on that aspect. I think you can get 3 plates though, I will say. I believe it. Um, and I think that when you do, if you want to go down that path, you'll probably have 18-inch arms, just to say. I don't see that being unrealistic for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've always noticed that the lifts correlate with the size, even if the lifts are not what people would expect. For me, I'm very meticulous in tracking everything.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm at my biggest, I'm always at my strongest, and vice versa. Like they do follow each other. Like if I cut, I might look smaller and I'll get weaker, but when I bulk, like they still track very, very closely. And so even if compared to the general population, one variable, the strength is lower than you would expect, for me,
It's
they
still
still
consistent. Yeah,
correlate. Yeah. And that's why I
exactly.
advocate, lifting as heavy as you can and trying to progressively overload because that's what I've noticed actually works. And it would be easy for me to say like, oh,
Yeah,
I
just to
got these
fluff and pump.
arms.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
oh, it would be so easy for me to market and do that and say like, oh, you don't have to get stronger. Like you can just do this weird curl variation, and that would be marketing gold because being the contrarian
Mm.
always is easier to market. Oh, everyone else is doing it wrong. I've discovered this new exercise.
Mm.
Don't follow these people telling you to do squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, pull-ups, etc. They're all idiots. This is like stuff from the 1960s, whatever. We have this new training system which can get you jacked with only 3 easy payments of $39.95.
Exactly. And that's respectable because you're in a position where you literally could get away with that. It would be so easy for you. You could say, look at me, guys. I bench 250. Look at these gains. It's because of this workout that I don't
Yeah,
do, but you're going to do it too, right? And get these gains. So
yeah,
that's awesome because in your case, because you document everything, there's going to hit that point where you'll continue getting stronger and it will be reflected in your size. And I think this
yeah.
year you've already made some pretty good gains as well. And if you look at your progress from last year, like there are noticeable um, correlated variables.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think one of my biggest regrets is not tracking like arm measurements, thigh measurements,
Uh,
chest measurements earlier. Like I wish I
mhm.
had done that from day one. Um, I mean, I don't because I generally don't know where I was when I started, or even like 3 or 4 years in. I started
Could just
tracking in like,
estimate. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like, oh, well, my arms look like they're 12 inches, but like I just have no idea. So, if anyone's listening to this and you're sort of just starting out, just take measurements. Just take measurements. On my Instagram, I posted a quick guide, just a quick little like picture
Hmm.
to how to measure the various muscle groups, body parts. It's pretty quick with a tape measure. Might take 5 to 10 minutes, um, but it's information that is nice to have. And
Yeah.
you don't have to do it every day or even every week, but every month or two, just say, okay, well, I can track my progress this way, and that's objective because when you get
Exactly.
more advanced, progress does tend to slow down, and you want to have those numbers.
Yeah, and you can use those as future reference points because I know some people are going to say, well, what if you bulk and you gain fat, which skews the measurement? That might be true, but if you've done multiple bulks and cuts, you're going to see those measurements average out to a higher number. So even then, they're still accurate.
Yeah, yeah. Like if I cut, I'll lose. Um, if I went down to 10% body fat or so, I would lose at least half an inch on my arms, maybe three quarters. Just because even if you maintain every gram of muscle, I mean, you can see there's not a lot of like vascularity or definition. It's just like, there's fat that adds to the measurement. So when you lose that fat, you're gonna, unless you replace that with muscle, you're gonna lose the measurement in terms of the absolute size. And, odds are you're not going to be gaining that much muscle during a cut. And so you're probably going to lose size. Just, it's inevitable.
Yeah, well, just say I lost an inch and a half on my arms.
Oh,
Usually,
yeah.
yeah, I didn't think it was gonna be that much, but it looked good when I was flexing, but that's about it. That should also be discouraging for certain people because your arm might look fine right now, but then it's just going to be tiny when you get to a certain
Yeah.
level of body fat.
Yeah. No, like if I tried to get shredded, I'm not sure how much I would lose. Yeah, it might be an inch and a half.
Hey,
Because
everybody's
you
different,
lose,
you know?
yeah, you lose glycogen, you lose
That's,
water
yeah.
as well. Like if you're depleting and stuff, like you'll get weird fluctuations. Um, the thighs would also probably lose a couple inches because like you don't know how much fat you have. I mean, it sounds bad,
Yeah.
but like even at 20% body fat, um, it's everywhere. The little bastard fat cells, they're everywhere. Like they're on your neck, they're on your like they're literally just all over your body pretty much. Even like on your face, right?
Yeah,
Like you
your
don't realize it,
cheekbones,
but
everything.
yeah, like your temples and stuff. Like when I get lean, I'll have veins in the side of my
Yeah.
temple. They're not there
Well,
when I'm fluffy.
which is a good sign for people who want to rock a fluffier state because if you can't distinguish what's the fat because it's spread everywhere, well, that's great because now you're just bigger. You got the muscle already, and now there's that extra layer that's giving you that thickness. And that's why
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
made that video talking about how you're 20% body fat and that's okay, well, it is okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people need to realize that. The exception is I had a few people message me and they had just more unfortunate fat storage genetics, I
Yeah,
guess I would say would be the most polite way to say it, where they had just like they had, biceps veins and like quad definition, but then like just these love handles
yeah,
and like, maybe they're the
yeah,
same body fat percentage, but like it was stored in uh an unfortunate way, I guess. So for them they had to maintain a leaner physique just to have a better
yeah.
aesthetic.
But even in those people, they can still be reasonably lean and not shredded, and it'll take care of that to a certain extent. I think it's important not to compare ourselves to other people. Like for me, I have to get really lean to see the bicep vein, and for my
Yeah.
face to get caved in. Those are the two spots that are very noticeable.
Huh.
Otherwise, I'm pretty much good. But if you're not obsessed with having that model face to begin with, then it doesn't really matter. If your jawline doesn't look like a freaking piece of diamond, it doesn't have to
Just
be.
grow a beard.
There you go, that too. And that's where
Boom.
illusion
Yeah.
strategies come into play. What
Yeah.
types of clothing you wear, and just taking care of yourself in general. Because one thing is that a lot of people are focused on the mass, the lean tissue,
Yeah.
but they don't have maybe the best hairstyle, or they don't take care of their beard, or they just dress crappy in some cases.
I feel attacked.
You feel attacked. Some people become gym bros too, in the sense that is all they do. So they have these great physiques, but then nothing else going for them. So I think it's about having the full package overall. Like you should be able to use the gym to make yourself better. And now that you had success with building a respectful physique, you have like the lessons have been acquired in being patient, uh, working hard towards something, and finally reaping those rewards. You can take that and apply it to anything in life. So I think that's what it boils down to in the end. Using it to enhance your life, not become it.
Yeah, like if you can build a great physique naturally, you can do a whole lot of
You can
shit.
do a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, like the fact that you can do that and you didn't take a shortcut and you grinded for the 5 to 10 years necessary, you can do a lot of shit. Like you can take that work ethic and apply it to a whole bunch of areas. Whether it's business or developing other skills or whatever. And I think that's a good lesson to learn for people. But if you take that shortcut, maybe you're losing out on more than the muscle. You're losing out on that journey. Like you're getting the
Yeah.
muscle, but you're not developing the wisdom, and you're not learning that work ethic because you just took a pill or you just injected and then you got something for free, which by the way is also going to go away in large part when you stop using that.
Yeah.
Um,
And how's
but
that
like
gonna
I'll
affect your
look,
mind? You know?
yeah, exactly. Like I'll look just as good in 10 years or 15 years, and I don't have to rely on, some compound or like the latest supplement or anything like that. So I think there's a lot of value in like knowing that you built this, and once you built it, you've got it, basically.
Yeah, and you know for a fact that it was 100% all you. There's no thoughts in the back of your mind that, oh, was it the addition of this drug? Because I'm
Yeah.
sure that must eat away at these dudes, especially when they do get off and they start losing size. Those questions must come in their brain, right? And maybe that's why they don't actually get off. They can't. They've and the thing is, the longer you're on the stuff,
Addictive.
the more the body's dysmorphia kicks in,
Yeah.
and you might be on it for life, or just never um, get out of the gym bro mindset. Whereas
Yeah.
you, 10 years from now, you can just take it easy. It's easy to maintain muscle. You paid your dues already. You know what it takes to build physique. You've optimized your programming. You can help out others if you so choose to, who are on a similar path. And it's like
Yep.
there's no stress.
I don't have to worry about like, yeah, anything like that. And especially living in China, like I don't want to have to, get some testosterone in the mail or some shit. I don't even know where I would, if you're traveling and shit, and it's illegal in some places. Like you can't go somewhere with testosterone in your bag. Like it gets, seized and stuff. So, just staying natural, it's so much easier in terms of that kind of thing. Maintaining is pretty easy. Um, I could maintain on probably 3 full body or maybe even 2 full body workouts of like an hour and a half or so per week.
Oh,
Like
easy.
yeah, it doesn't take a lot, right? Um, I think the volume to maintain your muscle is somewhere between a third to 1/9 of the original volume that it took to gain. So,
That's
you know,
crazy.
3 sets, 4 sets a week or something, or maybe even less. Like Alec Onkiri, he was doing 20 rep squats, and I think
Hmm.
he was doing 1 set per week, and his
Yeah,
legs were at least maintaining, if not growing. And so the intensity is there. And, if you build a great physique, you know how to work by definition. And so you can get a lot out of that lower volume.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of
Whereas,
older guys, they do gravitate towards that style of training because, for one, they're still able to maintain, and two, it's an adequate stimulus enough. Now we're not at that level yet, but it just goes to show like it's not as hard as some of the juice heads will claim. Like
it's weird because I see TRT being really aggressively
it's
promoted.
aggressively talked about by these
Yeah,
guys.
like I get ads for it. I get, YouTube ads and shit. And I'm 32. I don't I mean I shouldn't need TRT for a long time, if not ever. Like I don't
Well,
foresee the need for that. But a lot of people, they get this idea in their mind that they need it. They think, oh, I'm 32 and my libido's going down. That's normal. No, it's not fucking normal. It's not. You should be in your prime or very close to it, well into your 30s, if not into your 40s. And so this expectation of TRT, it's fucking weird.
yeah,
In very rare cases you might need it, but 99.9% of people should not need it.
most people shouldn't need
Maybe
it.
Yeah, it's just not necessary. And if it is
Yeah,
necessary, it means that you betrayed your body somehow. Your
you
body didn't
probably
betray you. You betrayed your body through
yes,
diet or
yes,
lifestyle or sleep or training or something
or
else.
PDs or whatever. Yeah, it's all those factors combined. And it's interesting because in your case, so you being 32, that means you started not at 16 years old, just to say.
No.
You started at the time where apparently your testosterone started declining, right? And now, Jeffrey, you know the age where apparently you're screwed is 35. So I guess in 3 years from now, you have to stop being an influencer. Just saying.
Well, I'll have to make a lot of money before then. Just cash
Cash
out.
out, man. Maybe if you get that camera, you start doing those workouts, you'll be okay.
Yeah, yeah. Buy my weak little inch program. It'll put inches on your arms, and you won't have to do anything at all except the pink dumbbells. Buy now.
Hey, if you go to failure, it'll work because that's what matters, right? 0 reps in
Yeah,
reserve,
yeah.
bro. So
Just do
technically,
a lot of volume. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think people have the pain tolerance to handle the pink dumbbells for that many reps.
You know, the volume thing is interesting because um I don't know exactly what like your volume is or how you track volume. But one thing I've seen is people doing way too much volume,
Hmm.
but not quality volume.
Yeah, like I know what you're saying. So it's proximity to failure, basically. Like if you're doing over 30 sets of muscle, those aren't failure sets or close to it. You got a fuck ton of reps in reserve. So
Yeah.
you get the same results with maybe half the volume if it was more intense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Whenever I see someone doing huge amounts of volume, there's almost always an effort issue.
It has to go
And
down.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like there's this inverse correlation, inverse relationship between your effort per set and the sets you can do. So when I see someone doing, huge amounts of volume, by definition, they're not gonna be to failure and probably not even close. Just
Yep.
because people can't estimate their reps in reserve very accurately. Um, and when you see no bar speed slowing, it's not. I mean, it's nowhere near failure. I mean, there's a few
Hmm.
exercises where maybe failure creeps up on you, where the bar speed doesn't slow that dramatically. But for most exercises, you'll see this progressive slowing. And actually, studies have mapped this out and shown like, hey, this is what happens to the bar speed as you actually go to failure. And so when I see zero slowing, every rep is the same, and then they just stop. To me, that's a clear sign that they have multiple reps in reserve. And when I see the same people doing huge amounts of volume, I want to say to them, hey, like you could cut your sets in half or maybe even less and get better results
Yeah.
because it's just so much a lot of cortisol, a lot of wear and tear on the joints, etc., just from doing this volume that is not actually doing anything.
And a lot of wasted time in general. And the fact
Oh yeah.
that you have to do more exercises. So it begs the question, like, how many exercises do you really need for that muscle to grow? Like, I think I saw your video on arm training. You do barbell curls, incline dumbbell curls, and hammer curls, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. I do easy bar curls, regular barbell curls, and most of the time I don't even do my dumbbell curls, to be honest with you. It's very simplistic. Now I might do variations of those, but like you don't need
Not
a
much.
lot.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the elbow is pretty simple joint. I mean, you can bias the brachialis, you can
Yeah.
bias the actual biceps, but like these people who have 50, literally 50 curling variations on their channel, I know what they're doing. Beginners might not know what they're doing, but you'll get more from 3 to 5 curling variations than 50. You'll get more from less because you can actually track them and you can actually progressively overload
Yeah.
without always just switching, feeling like you go somewhere, but not actually doing anything. So, for example, for triceps, I'm basically just doing 3 movements: rope pushdowns, overhead extensions where I'm standing and the cable attachment is below, so
Oh,
vertical,
nice.
and then another one where I'm twisted away and I'm going like that. That's basically all I've done in terms of specific triceps work over the past 6 months. Just rotating through those three, maybe doing
Yeah.
2 of them per session, um, and just getting better at less exercises. Because that's one thing I did very early. I would rotate through a whole bunch of movements. But the trouble is, most of them were garbage, right? The more variations you have in play, the more likely that a lot of them are trash. And so most natural lifters that I've seen, they have a few different variations that they found work very well for them, and they don't fuck around with the garbage. They don't dig around in the scrap heap looking for magic exercises. They've already found the few that work really well for them, and then they just cycle those in and out, as one gets stale, or you feel beaten up in a certain area, and then you just swap everything in and out and in and out. And I think that's the best way to go about things.
You have your staples. And even if you're doing something like the conjugate system, which is what I
Yeah,
personally run, you know what you're going to go back to. Like
yeah,
at a maximum, you might have 3 months where the exercises are swapped out, but then you'll go right back into them. So you can always have that reference point. It's not randomized, and they all have a purpose. And if you can't give me a real reason why this exercise is effective, then you're just making it up.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
what I see with these influencers. They can't tell you why it works. They say just do it, and you're gonna get this great cramping in the biceps, and you're gonna feel the blood rushing into the muscle. What? Because I can't do that with other curls, you know?
yeah, exactly. If you can't get a pump with a barbell curl, something's fucking wrong with you.
Yeah, you know?
It's just that you can't market it because it's the basics, and the
Yeah,
basics you can't, they're not new, they're not novel. If you make a video on barbell curls, um, I mean, it's not going to do as well as if something is, it's very eye catching, and it's
yeah,
new and novel, and there's a special angle, and sometimes they do make it up, uh, or like link to my blog post for why this exercise is effective, or they'll cite some research that doesn't actually support what they say, but most people don't
yeah.
actually
There's a lot of
look.
that. They don't actually go through it, but you've
No one
broken
actually
that
looks at
apart.
stuff.
Yeah, on
Yeah,
some stuff.
yeah. So it's yeah, it's a big issue, and I tend to I've actually used fewer exercises recently and been better for it. I used to swap everything in and out very, very frequently. Or what I would do is I would be very heavily influenced by something I read or saw online. And I'd be like, oh, front squats. Like I'd see it, video on front squats, and I'd be like, front squats. That's the answer to everything. And I would only do front squats
Mm.
for like a week or two. And then I would not do front squats again for months and months and months, because like I
Yeah.
was just tired of that, and I got, oh, this thing, but then you see something else, and you're always just
Mm.
like obsessed with it without actually understanding the movement and working it into your training plan regularly enough to stay with it and
Exactly.
to know what it actually does and what a progression on that lift does for other lifts as well.
Well freaking said. You have to know all those specific details. And I think that's why if we're talking about exercise variations, biomechanics is probably where it's at, but like sound biomechanics. Like I think you follow N1 Education, and
Yep.
he talks about different strategies of biasing X muscles. Like in the case of the rope pushdown, you can hit the long head more by using two ropes or just having a longer extension so that you're in external rotation, you're less internally rotated. So stuff like
Yep.
that is awesome, you know. And you don't just jump at everything you see. You have to understand it first, know why you're doing it, and then
Yeah.
get some experience with it. Roll with that exercise for at least 3 weeks. It's just like people program hop. They can't even dedicate themselves to a system, let alone
Yeah.
the exercises.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. A lot of people, they don't actually, you said it before, they can't explain why they're doing something. They're just doing it. And
Yeah,
some people overthink their training. That is a thing. But how many people underthink their training? That's not talked about very much. People who underthink their training. And I think, some people criticize, science-based influencers, or they say like they're overthinking their training, but a lot of people are underthinking their training, and they actually
mm,
need to be told to think more,
yeah.
to actually
It's a
consider
spectrum.
why they're doing something. Yeah. So, take a step back. What are your goals actually? Because some people don't even know their goals.
Yeah,
They don't even, they're like, oh yeah, I want to do fitness. I want to get bigger. Okay, where do you want to get bigger? My arms. Okay, how big are your arms right now? Oh, I don't know. How big do you want to get them? Like they don't even know their specific goals. They just like have this
Yeah.
very vague vision about where they want to be, but you have to quantify it
Yeah.
either in the numbers and the measurements, the numbers on the scale, the numbers on the bar, or something. Otherwise, and some people don't even keep a training log.
No, not
Instead of
even.
just yeah, they're just like, oh, I'll get a new client and they'll be like, oh, well, can you send me your training log or your training history, and it'll be in my questionnaire. I ask, what is your training history? Describe in as much detail as possible, and it'll be like, I have lifted for 3 years. That's all.
Mm, you
Just
have
one
some work
sentence.
to do, buddy.
So,
But it's
if you're a
it's
beginner, keep a
it's
training
true.
log, take measurements. Like, data is
Yeah,
definitely useful.
that stuff is so helpful, especially the logs. Like, I'm fortunate enough to have started doing that the day I got into the gym, and it wasn't with apps back then. I would bring a freaking notebook to the gym, write it all out, and I don't know where that notebook went, but I wish I could find it because it had all the progression laid out, and it's beautiful when you look back years later and you could see it objectively what happened. So I think what you said is so true. You have to know where you are and where you're going to be in the future, and most importantly, do what you want. It has to come from you. And you said before, like, oh, front squats, I'm gonna do those for a little bit, and then I F off for a couple months. That means it wasn't really for you, right? And the thing is, that's like a nothing example, right? It's so much worse in online fitness because you have people who are training like athletes that they never had any desire to even compete in those sports, yet they're going full blown. And I'm just gonna say bluntly, like powerlifting is a great example of this. You got young kids who want to be buff. They don't care about strength per se that much. You know, maybe they want to look like Steve Reeves or something, or an old school bodybuilder, and they're going out running ultra specific powerlifting programs. That's not what they want. You didn't get into training for that. And if you happen to fall in
Yeah.
love with it, well, fantastic. I'm not going to knock you for it. Like, you're entitled to your goal. But if it's not what you really want, you're going to quit at some point or just be frustrated with the process. So, we're in this journey long term. It's going to be, it's way longer than most people even realize. So you might as well do something that you love and, choose
Yeah.
goals that are reasonable.
Yeah. I completely agree. And the big three are a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. And if you're putting like all your volume into the big three, and you're trying to drive those way up, but nothing else, and you're getting obsessive with the numbers on those lifts rather than just using them, and your goal is hypertrophy, something's very wrong. Like those are great lifts, but they're not everything. Like you do
Hmm.
want some variation, um, just to stay healthy. And power lifters, even they don't do only specific squat, bench, deadlift. Like even they have accessories. They vary the percentages. Um,
True.
they're not just doing one rep max on these lifts. They're doing reps, they're doing volume, they're doing variations, they're doing accessories, etc. Because that is optimal for them. And so if your goal is just to look good, or to be generally functional, even though I hate that word, but even if that's your goal, like that should just be one piece of your training, and then you can build around those. um, but it's important not to overemphasize, and this is where a lot of people
Exactly.
straw man it. And so when I say like, oh, get stronger, they're like, oh, so you're saying that like one rep max is all I should? No,
Uh,
that's not. There are a lot of different ways to go about it, where it's
hmm.
not just attacking the one rep max numbers on a few different lifts.
Yeah. I think what needs to be emphasized, in my opinion, is just general progressive overload. And when we talk about strength, it doesn't mean high percentages. It simply, we're talking about increases in performance. And that could literally be as simple as the reps in reserve increasing. So you used to do everything 3 by 10 and to maximum failure, and now you're just going through it. Or you take your 10 rep max and turn it into your 15 rep max. Or you never do low reps. It's always the same reps, but you just swap the variation and get stronger at those. Like, I think we need to get out of the idea that it's only about singles, doubles, triples, fives.
Yeah.
For hypertrophy, it's a lot more nuanced. And the exercises we do, sure, the big three can be included, and those will always stand the test of time. But there's variations of those that are even better for size. Like I believe RDLs are superior than
Yeah.
conventional deadlifts if you're a bodybuilder. Or maybe you don't want to do it with a straight bar. You want to smash the trap bar, go right ahead. Or you're going to do weighted pull-ups. Well, those aren't a competition movement for powerlifting anyway. Still put on some great size.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And this is where a lot of people straw man progressive overload. They make
Yes.
progressive overload, oh, it's only adding weight to the bar. Well, no, there's a
It's more
lot of
than
different
that.
ways to do it.
Yeah.
You increase the reps, maybe increase the sets, add a pause, slow down the eccentric. Even something as subtle, like you mentioned the RPE going down, that's still progression. Like sometimes I'll have someone not increase in weight, not increase the reps because it didn't look as good as I wanted it to look. It looked a little bit sloppy in the last couple of reps. And I just said, okay, we're going to take the same weight again. And they're like, okay, so do I add reps? No, no, like you're just using this as a feeder lift for something else. And you don't necessarily have to progressively overload on everything at the same time. You can use,
Yeah.
even like I'll do chest supported rows with 30 kilos per hand. So like, almost 70 pounds, which is not a lot. I'll do that for like 4 sets of 15. I've been doing 4 sets of 15 on that for months. It just
Mm.
looks better now than it did when I first started. Like more range of motion at the top.
Yeah, yeah.
Started it was like a little sloppy, and the last
Yeah,
5 or 6 reps were all partials where I was trying to pull as high as I could.
exactly.
I just failed. So I was beyond failure. It was still 15 reps, kind of, but now it's more range of motion. A better contraction at the top, more controlled, better eccentric, better stretch. Same weight, same reps, same sets. It's just a different way to progressively overload. Same with cheat reps. You go from
Hmm.
like an awful 3 sets of 10 on curls to where you're cheating excessively, to where you're cheating a little bit, to where you're cheating a little bit in the last couple of reps, to where you're cheating not at all, and it's super strict. That's a ton of progression.
Yeah,
And that could be a year with the same weight, the same sets, the same reps. It's just, it doesn't stroke the ego as much because, it looks on paper like you haven't progressed
hmm,
at all. And if someone asks you, oh, like how your biceps are looking bigger, you curl in a lot more weight, and you're like, the same weight. And it sounds weird, but it's just a different way to progress. And I would say, possibly a better way in some cases.
yeah. Man, those are some great points. And I was going to ask you about chi reps too, but you basically clarified that. So we have to factor in the movement itself, and the strength curve that you put under. And chi rows, well, sorry, rows in general aren't that favorable in the sense that they tend to get very difficult at weird parts. And as you approach failure, it's like you even made a video talking about
Yeah.
why you should go through like all the joint angles of those
Yeah.
rows as you're failing, right? So the fact that you can use it as a progression model, as in maybe instead of doing 5 clean reps with 5 cheat, now it's like, I don't know, 8 strict and 2 cheat. That's an excellent demonstration of performance increase. And that is progressive overload. But some guy is going to tell you it's not. You had to increase it 5 pounds when it's obvious that this still works.
A lot of the times cheat reps, they get vilified because people assume that they're cheating in a certain way. For example, if you're doing a barbell curl and you're like, huh, huh,
Yeah,
like
like the
there's no
underhand power
tension on the
clean
bicep.
form.
Yeah, like you're just kicking it out of the bottom with your hips and then catching it in the top. That's not going to do shit for your biceps. And plus, it's dangerous on the way down if you're not used to that potentially. Whereas if you cheat just enough to still make it difficult, so you're starting with the biceps and you're getting a little bit of oomph, but not so much that it's just like it flings into the top position to where maybe you stop somewhere in the mid range and you still have to grind
Yeah,
through and you control the eccentric and you're cheating slightly more every single rep as you get fatigued, but there's still mostly stress on the biceps and you're only cheating enough where it's still challenging to the biceps. That is way different than just flailing around. And I think a lot of people conflate those two.
yeah,
Cheating can make a set easier, if you use it to avoid failure, or it can make it way more difficult. So if you're actually near failure for strict reps, then you start cheating just enough to extend the set, but those
Yeah.
reps are still taxing, still challenging, still stressing the biceps, and you're controlling that eccentric, which is pretty much the whole point. You're getting a lot out of that. But if you're like, say, 6 or 7, 8 reps away from failure on strict reps, and now you start cheating because you feel
Mm,
slightly fatigued, you're not going to get very much out of that because
right.
you're not really going beyond failure. You're just avoiding failure by cheating. And so you see a lot of people,
Uh-huh.
they're beyond technical failure because their technique broke down, but they're not near actual
Muscle
muscle
failure.
failure. So
Yeah.
those two things can be synonymous. If it's a seated leg curl or something, technical failure and muscular failure is going to be basically the same thing because you can't cheat on that movement. But for something else like a free weight movement, like a row or a curl, technical failure might not be muscular failure if you
Mm-hmm.
decide to let your technique break down, or it might be beyond actual strict failure. It just depends on
Yeah.
how you set things up.
I'm glad you mentioned that because those are really
I hope that
valid
makes
points that gets rid of that gets rid of the black and white thinking that's so prevalent. And even when we talk about some big compound movements, the muscles you're trying to target uh, may break down, which causes technical failure. But then the other muscles that contribute to that compound haven't hit that point yet. So in that situation, like not all reps are created equal. Even if on paper it says, "Oh, I did 3 sets of 10 to failure." Sure, you did, but was it appropriately directed? And that's also why if we escape the minimalist thinking of only doing a single exercise, we do a little bit more. It kind of accounts for all these nuances that we're talking about.
Yeah, like you mentioned N1, I really like their way of thinking about biomechanics because
Yeah.
it's not just how do we isolate this exercise or this muscle group, what is the function of this muscle, then let's target that. It's saying, okay, there's a variety of exercises that can target this area enough that
Enough. Yeah.
bias is enough
Exactly.
to make it the limiting factor. So yeah, if
Yeah.
you're doing a low bar, you're built like Lane Norton, you have long femurs, you're doing a low bar squat, the quads might not be getting a lot. Not picking on Lane Norton, he is a freaking amazing squat. Like one of the most ridiculous squats I've ever seen, given his build. Like he's not built to squat, but he still set a world record in the squat. That's phenomenal. But you can see how he squats. It's a lot of hips and not a lot of quads. And so squatting like
Mm.
that, it's not going to be optimal for quads. Whereas, other people, they might be built a little bit differently. And so they might be able to do low bar and get a lot of quad growth. A lot of it depends on the leverages and then your intention as well when you're doing the movement. So right now, I'm a lot more intuitive with how my body is moving
Mm.
compared to like 3, 4, 5 years ago because I actually understand the movement and why I'm doing it, and I know how to actually do it in order to get the most out of what I'm doing.
Yeah. And even when we talk about like those exercise form tutorials where it is shown properly, it still helps to know what you're targeting. And
Yeah,
that's where the further education comes into play. Because some guys are just copying what they see, but they really don't know like what they're biasing. And I like that you mentioned it's just got to be biased enough in certain
yeah,
respects in order to reap the rewards that matter out of that lift.
yeah. Like there's a lot of different moving pieces, and it's almost like a puzzle trying to figure out what is going to work best for you. And like you can take information from a lot of different sources, but at the end of the day, you have to apply it to yourself, and it always has to be viewed through that prism of, is it going to work for me? Is it going to work for my body? Is it going to be something that is actually going to work? And I've had exercises that I saw from from various sources, and
Mm.
I tried it and I didn't like it. Like
Yeah.
like JM presses.
Oh yeah.
I've tried them a bunch of times, and like really they just don't work for me particularly. Like I get more out of other movements, but I don't vilify that movement. right? Like I don't say, hey, JM presses suck, or upright rows suck, or some other movement sucks, because I don't like it, because I understand like someone else might. I think as a content creator, you kind of have to have that
You have to.
mentality and that awareness. Like, okay, well, it's not just about you. Like you see this from guys who, maybe they squatted or they deadlifted and they snapped their shit up, and suddenly those movements are now awful. And you
Mm,
don't want to load the spine. You don't want to have any compression. You don't want to like any even upper back rounding in the deadlift. Like that'll snap you up just because it gave them an issue. But we know that technique is only one part of the puzzle when it comes to injury
true.
risk management, and like a lot of it is fatigue management. A lot of it is the volume you're doing. Some of it's technique, even just like how much sleep you got. If you get less sleep, you're going to be more injury prone that day. That's been shown as well. And so, plus, genetics, obviously, and your
Yeah.
physical preparedness for that specific position. Um, and, you see this for some guys, they get an injury issue and they never do that movement again, or they go out of the way to talk shit about that movement
Mm.
when in a lot of cases, your injuries are your fault. Not always, but like
Most of
I'm
the
sure
time,
you've had
yeah.
injuries. Yeah, I'm sure you've had injuries, and I've had injuries. You can usually look back and be like, all right, like I was stressing this area on this day and this day and this day, and also this day, and like didn't really get a rest. And then you can look back at your program and be like, okay, well, I was an idiot, and now I know better because I had this issue.
The stronger you get, the smarter you should get as well. And that should be reflected in your programming to the point where even if the loads you're dealing with would technically cause more injuries on a sheer magnitude scale, it won't because you know how to manage your volume, your intensity, you know how to rotate the appropriate movements. So usually bad programming causes injuries or what's not optimal for you. And that's where like being in the trenches for a long time, you dial this in. Like I used to run extreme minimalist training and I was always feeling banged up and I was
Yeah,
younger, uh, weaker as well. Yet I had all these problems. And it's funny, in 2017, you can say I snapped my shit doing good mornings, right? I was going way too heavy, purely my fault. Horrible form. I wasn't strong enough to do it. I did, right? And that set me back for a while. But
yeah,
and I started saying, hey, maybe you should avoid good mornings. Just do RDLs. And I had that position for a long time. But in 2019, I gave them a shot once more, and now they're one of my favorite movements. I do them every single week, and I don't ego lift. I always use good technique. I know when to swap them out, and I mix them
yeah,
with RDLs for the best of gains, and they make you stronger at deadlifts and squats. So just because you had a bad experience with a certain exercise doesn't mean your experience is universally true. And I think we need to leave our biases aside. Just be honest that yeah, I screwed up. This was my fault, and let's not project that onto our audience
yeah,
uh, because we want them. This is saying misery loves company. That's what this
yeah,
is.
yeah. 100% agree. I mean, and I see channels like it's one thing for you personally to do an exercise, snap your shit up, and then be like, oh well, I'm never gonna do this again. Like that's not ideal or optimal, I would say. Like you can assess and say, I mean, it's easy to blame the exercise. That's what people do. I say, oh well, fucking good mornings, like upright rows, the rip my shoulders up. Well, like could have been a lot of other factors, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
it was you combining it with other stuff, wasn't a sufficient recovery. Maybe it was your specific technique, not feeling, how you should move during the movement or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just easier mentally to blame the exercise. And that's one thing. But when you have a platform and you're vilifying the exercises and you're saying, hey, these exercises are bad, that's when you're kind of poisoning the water hole. You're ruining it for everyone because, excuse me, there are still people who could benefit from that exercise. Heck, you could benefit from the exercise, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
when people have like, oh, top 5 exercises you should avoid or something like top, oh, never do this exercise or, you'll get hurt. There's a lot of fear mongering. And
Yes.
even the biggest channels or the biggest channel, they do a lot of this. You look at, you scroll through their page, and I'm in the process of making like a mini documentary on the biggest fearmonger of all. You might know, some people might.
I think I know.
I would say about a third of his content is fearmongering. Don't do
Yeah.
this, never do this. If you don't add this in, you'll get hurt. If you don't do this exercise, you'll get hurt. If you don't do your, I don't know,
Mm.
face pulls, you'll get hurt. If you
Yeah,
don't do
yeah.
a certain movement. And, this works very well for clicks because people respond. You have the carrot and the stick.
Mm.
The carrot is like, oh, you do something good, you get a benefit. The stick is you do something bad and you get a punishment. Well, it turns out people respond better in terms of clicking on videos when it comes to the punishment. So you tell people, oh, avoid these 5 exercises, shit, they'll click really well. If you say, oh, here are 5 exercises that can benefit you,
Hmm.
often not as good. And, people want to avoid snapping their shit up. They want to avoid, getting some negative drawback. And it's okay to talk about injury issues because they do happen. But at a certain point, it's really not helpful. And it's really just fear mongering in order to get the click. And I've had people who, their warm up was like 30, 40 minutes before lifting,
Oh,
doing all this.
yeah, all that pre shit.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, what are you trying to do? Like, do you have injury issues in the past? They're like, no, I've never been injured. Well, what are you doing? Like, a little bit of prehab is okay, but when you're doing 18 different warm up drills and shit, you're taken away from the
Yeah.
training, you're wasting your time.
A lot of that stuff is trendy too. And I don't even think some of these influencers do that. Like, oh, do this before benching.
I don't
Do you
do it
really
now.
do that? I think the majority just get under the bar, they do the empty for some reps and 135, 185, 2 plates. You just ramp it and you're good. Like that's what most
Yeah.
people do. Maybe they'll hit a like a band row and a band dislocation right before, but it'll be very quick. After 5 minutes, you should be ready to go in most cases. Unless you're
Yeah,
doing
like if
like the
you're,
winning warm up, which is like 15, but it's go,
yeah,
go, go. And it's the purpose of building GPP. But 99% of what I see is not that.
yeah, it's just like filler fluff. And if you take more than like, 5 minutes, maybe 10 to warm up and start feeling good, something's very wrong. Maybe if it's really cold out or something, but usually it's like you're either too beaten up to train and you need a deload or you need to manage your fatigue better. Like if you take 30 or 40 minutes to warm up to feel good, I mean something's wrong. Like that used to happen to me as a runner where I
Oh.
would I would I would walk out of, I'd roll out of bed and my feet would hurt and my entire body would hurt and like I
Mm.
could feel my bones aching in my feet and like all my joints hurt and just like systemically I was overtrained. Like people throw around the word overtrained like it's a frisbee. Most people aren't overtrained, but I was actually overtrained.
Well, runners get a lot of overuse injuries. That's very
Oh yeah,
common.
like I dozens and dozens of them. And so, I would walk around and then I would say, okay, I should take the day off because I'm like I can barely fucking walk. And but then like a little voice speaks in your mind. It's like, just do a recovery run. Just run a couple
Ah.
miles, just like get the blood flowing. It'll help for the recovery. And, so I get out there and I start shuffling, like, you know, basically limping around, like my feet hurt, my knees hurt, my hips hurt, everything hurts. My soul hurts just from too much, running 2 or 3 times a day and stuff like that. And,
Fudge.
yeah, like 10 minutes later, I start feeling not dead. And then I start feeling okay. And then 30, 40 minutes later, I'm just like hammering along. Like it's another hard workout, hard tempo run or threshold run or, adding in hill sprints and stuff like that. And of course, the next day, feel even worse. You feel
Mm.
okay once you're warmed up, but, you know, long term, you're just too beaten
Yeah.
up.
First of all, that's insane. And I don't doubt for a second that that helped you immensely for your lifting because you understand how your body feels. Like those are important lessons right there. And it just goes to show how much work it really takes to be a great runner compared to just building a body with hypertrophy training. Like you're putting way more hours and the body and the
Yeah.
nutrition demands as well. Would you say you were eating more because of all that cardio compared to now, just as a result of burning
Uh,
all those calories, or not so much?
Actually, well, the weird thing about like when I was overtrained specifically, my appetite would either be ravenous or nothing.
Okay.
It was really like there was no consistency there. It would either be like 1,200 calories or 5,000. Like it was all over the
Wow.
place. Sleep was just completely. I would wake up every 90 minutes, and this is
Shit.
when I realized like a human sleep cycle is 90 minutes. So I would literally every 90 minutes to the minute, like, oh, 1:30, 3 o'clock, 4:30, 6 o'clock. It was, and I didn't sleep well for like even months and months after I stopped destroying myself
Wow.
running. So like when I when I get and my performance went into the gutter, but I was still just hammering and hammering and hammering, like a bunch of injuries that I had to, manage but not manage well because I was an idiot. And, so when I get people who are like, "Oh, I had a bad session on bench.
You're like,
Am I overtrained?" I'm like, dude, dude,
wow.
like getting overtrained through lifting is extremely difficult. It's almost all endurance sports because that affects your endocrine
Mm.
system, cortisol levels way more. For
Mm-hmm.
lifting, you'll break down structurally, you'll get injured way before you actually get overtrained, in like the vast majority of cases. So,
So you,
just because you overreach slightly, it's not overtraining.
yeah, like when your body's banged down to that point, you usually can't push through the pain because you're gonna tear something, or it just hurts too much. Like it's hard, if your rotator cuff is all messed up, you got aches in your traps, you're like, you can't even retract your scapula. Like you're just gonna half-ass that workout in most cases. Or if you really try to push it, you'll just strain it more, and that's gonna be the end of it. Whereas running, I
Yeah,
guess you can kind of keep pushing through that, and you'll get progressively more sore in the ankles, the knees, and the shins. But somehow you'll still find a way to get up and just do what you got to do.
yeah, which is not smart at all. Like it's not productive. And I think most top runners, they do manage their fatigue and they take their
Yeah,
easy runs, often very easy. That's the thing. Like
the
even
periodizer,
from what
right?
yeah, exactly. So they'll fluctuate in terms of effort. Their easy runs might be 2 or 3 minutes. Oh shit, might be 2 or 3 minutes slower than their like 5K pace. So it's very easy, and not at all taxing.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the running, but you mentioned something very important before, which was to be careful of fear-based messages, because whenever there's that, you got to start digging deeper with the reasons why the person is trying to fear someone into not doing X movement, and usually it's over exaggerated on some exercise, or they're not telling you the second
Yeah,
story, which is okay, this movement as it stands may be problematic, but if you modify it with this very simple trick, you're gonna be okay. So like upright rows, um, no one's saying to grab the barbell this close and bring it all the way up to here, But but if you use dumbbells or you widen out that grip and you limit it to say the nipple area,
yeah,
they might feel perfectly fine on your joints. Or on a
yep.
dumbbell
Hips and
fly,
dips.
yeah, exactly. Snatch grip high pull, same thing, it's similar.
Yeah,
Or like dumbbell flies, if it bothers your shoulder to have your arm out completely straight, leave a slight, you know?
power fly.
There-
Yeah,
There's always a way to modify some of these dangerous movements, quote unquote, to make them safer. Even the bench press, I've heard some guys say, don't do it, or don't touch your chest. Well, if you subscribe to that, which I personally don't, you can do a board press. Done.
yeah.
A half board press, one board press. Now there's no excuse. You don't have to switch to some
Okay.
weird movement to solve that problem.
Yeah, that's when I know someone is almost certainly being disingenuous when they're vilifying an exercise, and they're not talking about how to make it better or how to modify it. It's just like don't deadlift, don't bench, don't squat. And if you talk to some of these people, it's like 80% of my training would be gone. It would just
Mm,
be like
how much,
80% of
eh?
my movements that I do, they'd just be like, no hinges, no squats, don't do anything overhead,
Oh, that too.
because obviously that's an idiotic thing to do. And like, I get the logic. where it's not targeting any specific area as well as something else. But even if you look at the top natural bodybuilders, they're not isolating everything. Like
I've
they're
never seen
still
anyone do
doing,
that.
yeah, yeah. It's like it just, I'm not gonna say it doesn't work. It's just that you don't see it. And so there has to be something to these compound movements that everyone is doing, from a time efficiency standpoint, but maybe just from an overall stimulus standpoint.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to have to do 4 movements when you could just squat. You don't want to have to do 6 movements when you
Yeah.
could just squat.
I've heard some people try to like explain the reasons behind why the compounds are magical, but maybe you know what? We can just be honest and say we're not smart enough to know why they work that well. They just do
They
for
just
some
do.
reason, you
Yeah,
know?
like maybe you don't have to know exactly, but everyone is doing them, right? It's if you look at especially naturals, some IFBB pros, they get away with doing some stuff that is sort of exclusive to them. But if you look at almost all natural lifters, you see the same patterns. You see the same movements, the same variations. You see similar volumes that changes a little bit, pretty similar rep ranges. You don't see guys getting big off of sets of 20 in the bench or 30 in the, like, who does that? I actually reviewed a very famous enhanced lifters bodybuilding plan,
Hmm.
3 sets of 30 on the incline bench press. And every fifth rep, it was a 5 second lowering. And the tempo
Yeah.
was slow. It was like a 3 second lowering on most reps or something. And I did the math and it was like almost 3 minutes for each set
Hmm.
if you use the tempos and the pauses and everything correctly. Have you ever done a set that lasted 3 minutes of constant tension?
Unless I was specifically trying to do that, like I'm going on Bosu ball, I got my dumbbells, 3 minute timer, let's go.
Yeah, like I don't know how much weight I would be able to bench press for 3 minutes straight of constant tension. Not not much.
Yeah, and I think another problem with that is when these people are viewed as honest, and sometimes they are, about everything. But the thing is, honesty is not the same as getting results. You got to be able to separate the two. And some of these people, they don't even realize they're training in a way that's not going to serve most naturals. And I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or they're just so deep in their world that they just forgot completely. And I know who you're talking about. I looked at his program and I was like, yo, this is garbage. I would never run this in a million years.
It's like I couldn't have written something that bad myself. Just like the volume, the drop sets, the rep range,
It's
the
like,
exercise selection wasn't bad. It was just how everything was implemented.
yeah,
Um,
like on the
it was
numbers
seven
level, you
days a
know?
week potentially. Like there were optional days. I mean, it was a mess. And I would think even he doesn't do that, right? Because even enhanced lifters often, I mean, they train differently, but not like that in a lot of cases. Like DC training is very popular for enhanced lifters. That's viable for naturals as well. But
Yeah.
but this plan was just like so far out there, and it's hard to say if it's written in good faith because maybe they did do this before and they saw results, and the
Yeah.
steroids do change what you can get away with and what proper programming is going to be. Um, but when you've been doing that for a very long time, that's all you remember. You don't remember what you trained like naturally when you've been juicing for
Yeah.
10 years or something.
I don't think it's necessarily written in bad faith. I think it's as we said, they're just so into that world that they assume this is going to be fine. Because if they did it, they would be fine, right? And I think there's a tendency also when some people write programs, they'll add in a little bit of extra volume that wasn't really needed. So let's say someone could have done 3 sets of 10 on their compound movements. For some weird reason, the coach will put 5 sets. Why? Because it's harder, and let's make my athlete work a little bit more. But did he
Yeah.
really need that? And I think that's extended to some of these juice heads. So I don't know if it's negative or whatever, but it's just something I've spotted over the years.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like one of the main things, the most common issue that I'll see with beginners is doing too much volume. More
Yeah.
often than not, I'll slash the volume, sometimes like a lot, in half. or sometimes even less. I've seen people doing crazy volumes and they're just not progressing. If
Yeah.
you have the choice between doing high volume and progress. Like that's going to be way better. Like what's going to do more for your chest, doubling your sets or, you know, getting 50% stronger.
There you
Getting
go.
50% stronger, like it, no argument there at all, I think, from most people. And you should use your volume to progress, and you should get away with as little volume as you can do and still make progress. But doing volume for the sake of volume is usually not going to be a great idea if you're a natural lifter, just because you don't have the capacity to recover from it. And again, the effort per set will go down. If someone is like, yeah, I train hard for all my sets, well, you probably could have trained harder if you were doing less sets. And there's going to be a trade-off there, but a lot of people are way too skewed. They're too far on the volume side and not far enough on the effort side.
Yeah.
And some people can do both, but not many people. And if you can do both, high volume with high effort, that's when recovery becomes an issue, and often your frequency goes down when you're probably going to
Mm,
want to keep that up.
I
So there's
think
always this
there's
give and take between the volume, the
yeah,
frequency, RPE, and then
there's
the
a
progression you're going to use.
there's a balance to all this, right? And I believe what the evidence says is you want 10 to 20 sets a week per body part optimally, but it might not be on the highest end of that scale. Like I think Lyle McDonald came out and said you don't need more than 10 to 12 sets, and some people recommend even less than that, like 8 sets a week per body part.
Yeah.
And that may very well be valid because even when I look at my own training experience, of course this is merely anecdotal, I didn't do that much volume to get my best and strongest physique ever. It was two compound movements, 3 sets each, and then one isolation, again 3 sets. So 9 sets a workout total, but this is like for everything and intense sets, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. They're hard. Like they have to be hard. Otherwise, you're just not going to get that much out of them. And low volume, like very low volume training can work, especially if you're a beginner and you're, a long way from your potential. I mean, if you're a beginner and you can't get results from pretty low volume, you have an effort issue almost always.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because like the odds of you getting better results from adding in more volume but then decreasing the effort is not high. You should try to learn how to push a set and then you might be able to add in more volume after. But going volume first before you learn how
Uh-huh.
to push a set, I mean that is
Okay.
like
I see.
that is not going to be a good strategy.
Yeah. It's that shift in psychology. And I think that's why many novice programs are aggressive with the linear progression because they want to teach you that, hey, you got to push yourself. You know? And that's why many times these people are able to add 5, 10 pounds of workout because
Yeah.
maybe they were already strong enough of doing so, but they need that push to get it in. So it's not like progress in the way they think they believe. It's just overcoming their mental limitations of what it means to push hard.
Yeah, exactly. Like something like starting strength, um, I think is okay. Like it's clearly worked for a lot of people. I'm not sure if it's optimal for hypertrophy specifically, but then again, it's starting
It's
strength.
starting you. It gets your base. Yeah.
It's starting you, and it's for strength. Like it's exactly what it claims to be, um, and it can work well, especially as beginners usually don't know how to push that hard anyway. And so you're
Hmm.
making these neurological adaptations, you're potentially gaining muscle, hopefully, but then you're also learning how to push yourself. And these things combined lead to being able to linearly progress for a long time. And usually when someone asks me, oh, should I add 10 pounds or should I add 5 pounds? Just add 5 pounds, right? Like
Yeah.
you can lengthen out this progression over a long
Absolutely.
time. If you rush things, you're just going to plateau sooner,
Hmm.
earlier than you would if you lengthened out that progression. And what's the rush? Adding 5 pounds a week,
It's
well,
great.
it's a lot. That's a lot of weight in a year if you add it up. But people want it. People want it now. People want it right away. They want a physique in 3 months because they're used to seeing all these bullshit transformations on Instagram, which are often, oh, like yeah, they gain muscle, but they also took a different angle, different lighting. They also shaved. They also
Yeah,
got like everything changed. Who knows what they did on the pharma side of things, and maybe they're regaining muscle that they used to have.
that too.
I've heard people who used to have great physiques purposefully getting out of shape
Yeah,
so they could have a transformation photo. Could be
yeah. I think,
Photoshop, like who knows?
bro, you had an Instagram post recently where you said the guy he'll grow out his hairy belly, right? So he'll fucking like a monster of this gut, and he sticks it out on purpose, and they try to purposely make themselves look like and then they'll start filming all that journey, and that is deception on another level. But damn, man, like even respect yourself, But
Yeah,
it's
yeah, no,
true.
no.
Like the
They'll
variables
make
have to be somewhat consistent. Or if you're gonna show the final form with different lighting, at least right before the
Mhm.
final form, show the starting lighting. You know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like there's so much manipulation, and it's to the point where if you post an honest transformation, people
People
don't
don't
give a
like it.
shit. Oh, they
No.
don't like they'll get a little bit of praise. Like I posted one guy, he got great results. Um, Same lighting before and after. I think over the course of 4 months, he lost 11 kilos, so like 25-ish pounds, while gaining muscle and a lot of strength, like visibly gaining muscle.
Mm.
He wasn't like shredded by the end. He was maybe, I don't know, 16, 70% body fat. So he went down from like almost 30, down to, high teens, maybe mid teens, somewhere around there. And that's a
Hmm.
great transformation. Like that's very well done. And he was
Absolutely.
thrilled. He was very happy. Like he was actually under the right lighting. He was looking like a beast. Um, but in the same lighting as the original photo, I mean, it was not nearly as impressive as some of these other pages you see. And, that's a shame because people who genuinely do get good results that they can and should be proud of, they're unhappy.
Yeah.
They're like, what did I do wrong? What do you mean, what did you do wrong? Like, you gained muscle while losing a bunch of body fat
It's
over the
true.
course of a few months. Like, that's phenomenal, right? And and
Wow.
yet and yet they're not happy with it in some
You know, I
cases.
I bet like the guy you're dealing with, if you would have done like crazy lighting differences, it would be better than some of these other transformations where the person lost less fat, but just optimized every factor. So that's why it's scary that we've hit this point, but that's the way the game is played, unfortunately. And I did that for years, Jeffrey. I would post my physique under the worst lighting conditions possible, completely washed out, garbage, right? And people would always say, "Oh, I respect it," and I would get lots of love from my subscribers, but it wouldn't get pushed out as much. And I
Yeah,
found that you have to do a bit of both. So
yeah,
don't do exclusively shots where you look like a god, but don't make yourself look too bad either. It's like taking profits. Uh,
yeah,
Feel free to showcase the best physique, your in betweens, and then your worst case, and then people will kind of figure out that okay, this guy doesn't look like that all the time. And I think
yeah,
Vitruvian Physique has done a good job of that as well. Like he'll show himself shredded, and then he'll talk about, well, this is how I actually look like year round. So
yeah, yeah.
you can always use that as a reference point. Just don't be deceptive and say like this is me all the time, which is unfortunately what a lot of people do.
Yeah, absolutely. His channel is great. One of my favorites, and he was getting called fat at some points and stuff when he was fluffy, which is ridiculous because he looked
People are
phenomenal.
crazy.
Yeah, he was big, strong. Would stand out in a crowd just from the muscle that he has. And it's one of those things where it's war in some ways because you get these channels and their thumbnails are just so clickable, and I view it as war because if no one sees your video, what's
That's
the
yeah,
point?
that's
Yeah, so
right.
it's I'm a lot more open to making very clickable thumbnails compared to like a year and a half ago
Hmm.
because you spend a lot of time and effort into a video, and
Exactly.
then if you just changed the thumbnail a little bit or the title a little bit, you I mean it'll do markedly better.
Yeah.
And you have to make that decision. And I know some very big content creators who I look up to immensely, and they've just said like, you got to do it.
You have
You got
to.
to do it. because like
Yeah.
you're competing against all these other videos, and like, at least the information is good. At least you're being truthful, but you have to, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to. I mean,
Yeah.
it sucks, and I would rather have it. I mean, it's a zero sum game, and it's almost like a prisoner's dilemma. If everyone else is clickbaiting, you kind of have to at least be somewhat
To a certain
competitive.
extent. Yeah.
Like RDLs are good. I like bench press, like bench
Yeah.
press tutorial. I mean, like, and then just like you standing there, as like, it has to be something to get people to click because they're inundated with title after title, thumbnail after thumbnail, where other people are optimizing things, and it's gotten to the point where other creators will say something like, "Oh, this video title is optimized for SEO," and
Mm.
might not be 100% truthful. I've seen that in a video description from the biggest fitness content creator. Get abs in 2 weeks. Oh, and then somewhere buried in the description, disclaimer for SEO purposes,
Wow.
search engine optimization. It's not search and that's literally being deceptive. It's just lying to people in order to get people to click on your videos. And they're saying for SEO purposes, the title might not be 100% accurate or something. And I draw the line at just like lying in the title. And you do see
Right.
some creators, oh, protein is bad for you. Deadlifts are killing your gains or something like that. And then you get to the video and they're like, by the way, at the end of the video, they're like, by the way, deadlifts are not killing your gains. It's just a title,
So it's
and
gotta be like I see what you're saying.
gotta be balanced.
Click truthful clickbait. Like there's no deception going on. If the person, if it's just fun and engaging, like, ooh, I want to go on this, then that's what they're gonna see. And you're there to provide information, and the goal is to help them, and it's presented in a real fashion, then it
Yeah,
should be all good. And
yeah,
if you gotta play that game, so be it. Like I do it myself now with
yeah.
the way I do my thumbnails. Back then they were split. I would take a snippet of my face of the video and then a random picture on the side. The moment I stopped doing that, my views exploded, and the content didn't really change that much. So
Hmm.
people will judge based off that. And you know what? Maybe we should give credit to some of these influencers for, you know, elevating our mindset on that because it is important. And it's not just fitness; it's the way YouTube works as a whole. So at least now we know how to customize it to make it more muscle friendly, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a balance, and the way I try to judge it is when someone gets to the video, is it what they would expect? Like, do they leave
Yeah.
the video with a bad feeling? And I've seen some content creators that I respect where it was clickbait, right? The title is something like, it was an interview, and the title was, "Oh, I asked this question, and then he snapped on me." And like, oh,
Ah,
there's this implication of some kind of tense
that's gonna be
situation, some kind of
yeah.
argument, um, but there wasn't. Like a lot of the comments were, "Oh, we've been clickbaited," or like, "Where's the argument?" Like, "Oh, he didn't snap. This was just a
Yeah.
normal conversation." And you know, people know what will get the click, what will get the view, and I guess you can try to justify it by saying the content is good and you're trying to help people. But for me, I draw the line. If I ever got a comment where it's like, "This is clickbait," and there's more than like one of those, it was too
Mm,
much. And
right.
I don't think I've ever gotten, that kind of accusation.
No,
But
you're
if I
good.
ever put out a video and it was like a lot of people not happy with, what the video was, or if it was being deceptive, or if I said like sugar is good for you or something like that, something clearly not really quite accurate, I would feel bad personally.
Yeah, I guess that the audience can't feel duped. That's all there
Yeah.
is to it. So as long as we all come in with the right intentions, there's no stress. Like we're just trying to make videos, help people out. It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And you do see some channels become, I don't want to say like a slave to the algorithm, but they're clearly very, very in tune with what will get clicks. And
Yeah.
all of their content is driven towards optimizing that aspect of things to the point where, like, if I made that video personally, I would feel guilty or I feel bad about the title, but for them
Yeah,
it's more about like the
I
business
feel
side of
like
things.
that must be a mental burden, worrying so much about that. But I feel like there has to be a trade-off. Like, as a fitness creator, it would need to be drama related because that's the only thing that's relevant to the algorithm in that moment.
Yeah.
And it would have to be highly specialized towards certain muscles that you can recycle with your videos. Like, you can make the same videos over and over again, but slightly different, so that you're still tricking the algorithm, but you're not really offering anything new. That's the only way I can see you getting away with it, because how much is there to talk about if you're going to be a fitness influencer for years at a time? Like, you know, to
Well,
do that, you have to get
yeah.
outside the algorithm. Like, I guarantee you, nobody's making videos on good mornings versus RDLs, but it's something that needs to be addressed, But the algorithm doesn't care.
Actually, I had a video on deficit deadlifts versus RDLs versus good mornings. I did like
Oh
4
my god.
things, and it tanked. It tanked because I realized it was too complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like if you do 2 exercises and you compare it like you're doing, that is people see that and they're like, oh, I've done these, I'm interested. But I was comparing like 4 or 5 exercises, and the
Mm.
title was like 100 characters, and it was like deficit deadlifts versus RDLs versus stiff leg deadlifts versus good morning. And then it was just like it's just too much, right?
That's cool
And
though. I didn't see that
yeah,
one, but I would watch it.
oh, it was trash. It wasn't. It was a while ago.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't that good. But
Yeah, I
it's
uh I watch like 80% of your videos, most of them. I don't usually comment on other people's channels, but I really like your stuff overall. So know that you got my support all the way. And
oh,
we should definitely do a part two on this, because there's so much to discuss. Like, I had a bunch of questions written down, and half of them I didn't even ask you. So that's fun.
awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely down. And I appreciate you, taking your channel and making it like a platform where other voices can be heard. And I think a lot of influencers, they take a very self-centered approach to content creation. So it's like, oh, here's my vlog, here's my day, here's my training, here's how everything is going, and it's like the vast majority of content is about themselves, and they always think about what they're going to get in terms of like channel growth or in terms of just money basically in a lot of cases from each video. um, and one thing I try to do as well is like highlight smaller channels because
It's important.
as you said, the algorithm is not friendly. Like I see some guys who have phenomenal videos, but they're under 1,000 subscribers. And when you're under 1,000 subscribers, growth is, I mean, it's challenging because you just don't have the numbers and the momentum to do anything. So I really appreciate you, taking up a video slot, to give me an opportunity, because I think it's something where it can really help just in general to get out good information because we can't really rely on the YouTube algorithm to promote good information or quality content.
Well, Jeffrey, it's a great pleasure on my end. I've enjoyed our conversation immensely. And the way that I see it, we're just growing the community, which is what this should be about. Because even when I look at myself, my channel always does the best when everyone is vibing it out in the comment section. They're able to interact with each other. They're going back and forth with me. We're playing around. It's just everyone is uplifted. And when you can bring that across other channels as well, where it's genuine, so some of my guys come to you, your guys come to me, it's just that nice back and forth. That's cool. And I recall seeing that years ago with some other channels, and I didn't have that at the time. And I was like, wow, I want this. This is something special because it's genuine, it's real. And I feel like we can only win because we are preaching what I believe is the correct message. And at the end of the day, I'm not just doing a talk with you and then you're just gonna chill and release a video once every 2 weeks or whatever. You're still grinding, you're still growing. Whatever happens from this point forward doesn't matter, right? The point is, uh, now we can expand that much more on both ends, right? And I don't see any downsides. We're all allowed to have disagreements. We're all allowed to, voice our opinions and just give some love to people who are actually putting in the work. And I was given a chance too years ago, and I think 2017, Omar Isaf emailed me and I got to do a video for his channel, and I appreciated that, and I always want to extend that back because I recognize what that does for the greater good. It's not about us. It's never about us. Once you understand that it really is the viewer, and joining everyone together, like that's when you have something truly beautiful that's long lasting. A lot of guys, they come in here for a year or two and then they bounce. They got their money. You never hear their name ever again. That
Yep.
doesn't happen with those who are truly about helping. And that's what I see with you. I see you sticking around. You're only getting better. I can already see that. The difference between 2020 and now, your content quality has evolved and you're putting in more work. And
Yeah.
just it's really nice to see, and hey, I just wish you continue growth as a whole.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And it really is about building a community. And a lot of the bigger channels, they're not necessarily doing that. They're getting the views, they're getting the subs, but if you look at the comments section, there's not the same sense in terms of like the amount of comments, in terms of the quality of comments, in terms of like the interaction, the conversations. If I look at, and I won't drop names, but there's a guy with about 4 million subscribers, and he's getting about the same number of comments on a video as you or I, or even fewer. And so, he has a lot of subscribers, but there's not necessarily the same sense of community. And, a view is nice, a subscriber is nice, but like it really is about, the comments and about that sense of community. And that's what actually matters to me. And I think, that's a better metric to focus on, actually
Yeah,
having real engagements with people and actually, having valuable discussions compared to just like, what is my sub count, or what is the view count, or like,
yeah.
click through rate, or something like that.
You get great authentic content out of that from everybody's part, and it's just so much more interesting, if you ask me. So I vibe with it, and word of mouth will do its thing. That's all I'm gonna say. If you're offering something that's legit, people are gonna come around and they're gonna show some support. So all we got to do is just keep staying true to that.
100% agree. Yeah. And, eventually, if you're spitting the truth, if you're spitting fire, and you're staying true to yourself and the message, and, telling people real information that's actually going to help them, it'll stand the test of time. And, it might be slower, but it'll be more long lasting.
Yeah, like this will probably happen to you, but in a few years from now, some videos you made years back are gonna peak. Sometimes that's how it works out. It's not meant for that moment, but there's a time and place for everything.
Yeah, some videos they're not ready for.
That's it. But I look forward to your future content, and definitely got to get you back on here again sometime in 2022, because got some more things to talk about training wise, and let's see how the world is doing around that time and how the fitness community has evolved.
Cool. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome, Jeffrey. So if people want to learn more about you or hit you up personally, where can they do that?
So it's just my name, Geoffrey Verity Schofield, at Instagram and then YouTube as well. I write on Quora at the same name as well. A little bit on medium.com, and then Verity, Verity, fit.com, where you can grab my book, which is, basically everything I've learned, or at least a pretty good chunk of it. 200 plus pages of useful information, exercise technique, programming, full templates, etc. Everything is thrown in there, and you won't have to pay anywhere near $200 for it.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to include those links in the description box. And guys, definitely check out Jeffrey's channel, show him some love, and we'll see you around.